You can lay out somebody's argument in basic form, but I feel like the way he's doing
Yeah.
it is almost laying out the entire conversation, which is not the same as
Yeah, it
laying out
takes
an
like
argument.
5 minutes.
Yeah, no, I really don't like the way that they're doing this debate. I really hate this university style of debate. Even though, like, formal debate, I have some experience in it, I really hate the way that it lays out compared to, like, an informal debate that you'll see on somebody like Destiny or Washer's channel. It's just so slow. It is so slow to get to the same conclusion, and it can be done much, much quicker if you're not doing this shit.
This debate could have been done in 40 minutes rather than like an hour and a half.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah.
Oh god, I think Scarecrow's gonna clip me there. Never mind. No, he didn't. Okay, we're good.
Mouthy
Mouthy Infidel. The incest debate.
The thing about Mouthy Infidel's debates is they tend to be long, so I don't know how long that is.
Hold up, it's an hour long. It's an hour long. An hour of Mouthy Infidel debating somebody on incest. Oh boy, oh boy. I love incest. I'm the number one incest guy on the internet. Okay.
We should try and get Mouthy Infidel on this stream though. That would be really cool if we could do that.
Wasn't he a philosophy guy? You said?
Yeah.
Bro, imagine doing philosophy. What a fucking nerd. Imagine doing philosophy. Go get some bitches on your dick. Alright, hold on. I think, go hit this. Does it have to go here? I don't know, I'm trying to figure out my opera stuff. That's actually below what I want it to be. I think it's here. And this is what I want. Here we go. This is the Mouthy Infidel bit. Well, I guess we're gonna go over that first. I should probably share my screen to you, so you can see it. Here you go, buddy. Here you go, pally. You can see it now. Yeah, I guess we're doing the Mouthy Infidel bit. This is peak optics, okay? People are gonna love that I'm talking about incest again. People love it when I talk about incest.
You know, me being your optics manager, I actually recommended you talk about incest again.
I love incest.
You should just call yourself Incestiny, okay? That's just
Incestiny. Oh, the Owl's live. Actually, let's pop over to Owl's Twitch stream real quick. Oh, this is Chud Logic. All right.
Yep.
Chud Logic's pretty British. Not a big fan. Not a big fan of the Brits. Be honest with you. Okay, hold
ban
up.
all British people from Twitch.
All right, let's go to Leftist Owl's stream real quick. What's he talking about? I got an ad. Cracker. There we go.
Bunk.
There we go. All right, let's do this.
Do you know how hard it is? Do you know how hard it is trying to keep you on good optics? Do you have any idea? Okay.
I literally have never had bad optics ever. I've never had bad optics. When I said the Nazis were good, it was good optics. Actually, it was great optics.
It was satirical. Okay, it was satirical.
It was satirical. It was satire. It was parody. Just like the Holocaust, it was just joking. Okay.
Yep. Just like it's like Mr. Girl tells jokes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Every bad thing he says is a joke, and every good thing he says is serious.
Yes, exactly. Unironically, yes. All right, let's do this shit. Mouthy Infidel.
Incest between consenting adults should be legal. I don't really think it's a moral issue whatsoever, and I don't think it should receive any moral condemnation or social disapprobation whatsoever. However, in this debate, we'll be focusing on legality rather than the inherent morality or social stigma of incest. However, most of the arguments I'm going to be presenting here would apply just as easily to either of those questions. So, okay, why do I think incest should be legal? Firstly, I would appeal to the following basic principle. For any X, X should be legal unless good reasons can be given for outlawing it. I claim then that my position has a natural advantage.
Oh god, his delivery is super fucking dry. Holy shit.
I told you.
I feel like this is Sahara Desert dry. Holy shit, dude. I think that X should be legal. If not Y, then Z. Okay, start laying out the fucking math equations. I know what he's saying. He's saying, X should be legal. X is the basic like framework, right? So using X. Things should be legal if we don't have a reason that they shouldn't be legal. Basically, we start with things being legal until otherwise, right? But then he says he adds X into it, like he's laying out a math equation, right? This is an algebra class. Right?
I mean,
we can chill the fuck out.
The biggest joke about Mouthy Infidel is that he's the youngest university professor to ever live. And there's a reason why people say that. Okay?
Why does he sound like a university professor?
He does he not? He does. He sounds like a university professor.
X should be legal until Y, if not Z. It's so good. It's so funny. Alright, let's go back to...
Incest should be legal. The burden of proof is on my opponent to show why it should be outlawed. Secondly, I would make a liberal argument from consent. The liberal position on consent, as succinctly as possible, is just that consent is a necessary and sufficient condition for a sexual act being considered moral and legal. The liberal position on consent can be justified by appeal to a few different arguments. Firstly, once we start saying that certain kinds of sex are wrong and should be illegal even between consenting adults, we open the door to authoritarianism, paternalism, and state intervention into our private lives. We generally value privacy, and we don't want the government getting involved with what we do in our private bedrooms, and the liberal view prevents that. Secondly, we could make an argument from autonomy. So the basic idea is I have ownership over my own body. I get to decide what happens to my own body, and outlawing me from being able to do what I want with my body is prima facie bad. Any other position, I would claim, kind of infantilizes people. So the opposition to what I'm saying would have to be that, you'd have to say that a consenting adult
this
can't
isn't
choose
okay.
to have sex.
Hold up,
wait,
holy
we
shit!
need-
This isn't high school debate. Okay, I don't need your 5-minute opening statement. Okay, chill the fuck out.
Okay, the other point I want to make is
Mhm.
while Mouthy is sort of going through the positions,
Mhm.
talking to normal people, the fact that he has made a few positions. So the problem with the autonomy debate is that people who are normally listening to him, so ordinary people, are going to take it that he then believes that a bodily autonomy argument would also apply to rape. And I think that would be like the problem from at least like an optical, like a normie viewing of this debate. And so that would be my concern.
Wait, so you mean like people? You think people might understand or interpret his argument as like the government shouldn't be telling me what to do with my body, even if I'm like gonna rape somebody?
Yes, because I've literally heard this argument before. Like normal people, if I use the bodily autonomy argument, people will like respond to me like with that type of shit.
If you think rape is okay, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because in this regard, he's talking about incest, which is a sexual intercourse, right? And now he's trying to apply a bodily autonomy argument. So I think like that's the problem. It's very different to applying like a bodily autonomy argument to like abortion, for example.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I don't know. It's, in my opinion, the way he debates is it's gonna be so hard for anybody who doesn't like actually listen to like university level debate to understand anything that he's saying right now. Literally none of this makes sense to anybody who like,
except us,
who isn't a virgin is essentially what I'm trying to get at. Anyone who like has come into contact with the sun in the last like 10 days, okay? I feel like it's gonna be really hard for anybody else to understand what the hell he's trying to get at right now. So that's definitely not great. Yeah.
Sex with another consenting adult, right? But if everyone involved consents, right, why is it your business who people have sex with? Thirdly, there's a utilitarian argument. If all parties are consenting to the interaction, it's likely that the sex is a net positive for all parties. If it wasn't, the parties likely wouldn't consent to it. Of course, there are exceptions. Sometimes people consent to things that are bad for them. But in general, I know better than you do what's good for me. So if two people want to engage in a sex act, it's reasonable to presume that it's a positive for the parties for the act to occur. And thirdly, another argument I would make is just that these laws cause a lot of harm, right? Imprisonment is
Sure.
a serious harm. It seriously depletes the quality of one's life, right? It's not fun. It makes your life drastically worse than it otherwise would have been to be locked up in prison for like multiple years.
Mm-hmm.
And as a side point, I would just say, even if you think incest is immoral and should be discouraged, that doesn't mean we should criminalize it or make it illegal, which is an extremely cruel response, right? There are other ways of preventing certain activities that don't involve locking people in cages. And then finally, I would just appeal to this sort of vague intuition that, in general, we should just respect people's choices, right? We should treat people how we would want to be treated. Everyone on the planet has
what the
some
fuck does that
tastes or
sound?
some sexual tastes that would be considered deviant or gross by one group or another. So we should just try to be more accepting and respect people's choices and preferences. We shouldn't demonize or criminalize people for what they choose to get up to in their own bedrooms. So that's pretty much it. That's
Who's the guy who he's going up against right now?
I have no idea. Like, he sometimes would just go up against like randoms. I don't know who this person is. The problem I have with this is I think Mouthy coming at it from one angle would have been stronger than making like 5 different philosophical arguments for incest. It feels I don't know why he's going, well, there's the utilitarian, then there's the liberal position, then there's the bodily autonomy. I don't know about you, but it just feels like it would be better to go at it from like one angle. Like, I feel you would have gone at it from one angle rather than like labeling the 5 different philosophical positions in favor of incest.
Well, you know, if we go down all the way to a very fundamental meta-ethical level, we can see, like, come on. I don't know, I feel like it almost comes off as though he's, like, berating his opponent with a bunch of different, like, stances and seeing what sticks. That's almost what it feels like.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't know.
An audience, they're not even going to understand his first argument, let alone his 5th. So, I don't know. It almost seems like a really, really poor decision just in general to do what he's trying to do right now.
Hopefully things will get better as they go back and forth, but yeah.
I don't know, dude. Has Mouthy had like debates on incest before? Is this like the first one?
No, he mainly debates economics or like philosophy.
It's really gay.
Hey, okay, you know, I like Mouthy because he represents my inner nerd, okay? But I don't know. Yeah, I just hope, like, as they go back and forth, I feel like I wonder what's Mouthy's strongest argument is going to be, because I feel like the strongest argument against incest, and we'd probably disagree with this, if you're going to make an argument against incest, it would be social stability to some degree. And
Sure.
I feel like if that guy's smart, that's where he will go with, because I feel there's a lot of really interesting roads you can go down if you go down the social stability argument.
Sure. Yeah, no, sure. But, like, I don't know. I feel like this person's probably not going to be able to address all of Mouthy's arguments. It's almost like he's throwing so many at him right now. It's going to be very, very complicated to, like, go through all of them. I was thinking it might be really, really smart of Mouthy to kind of take the the first position that he kind of gave, which is like, things shouldn't be illegal unless we have a good reason to make it illegal. Give me a good reason to make it illegal, and then just like to test them from there to see like where we can go with it. Yeah.
Mouthy has more of a Vosh style, I think, debate style to some degree than like a Destiny debate style, which is a breaking down. Who's this?
I don't know.
Michael.
We're streaming right now, Cracker. That's really fucking funny to me. Why are there so many people in the VC? Okay, that's great. Anyways, let's go back to it.
Yeah.
That's my basic opening case.
All right. And I'll try to be quick here, and thank you for that, because you're very clear.
Thank you.
So yeah, I think Mouthy Infidel today is kind of facing an uphill climb. Incest is something that's nearly universally a taboo, save for seldom cases throughout human history where it was encouraged, certain select states or governments, perhaps. However, the proposition of my opponent is correct. Regardless of the taboo, and regardless of the evidence of harms, the harms of inbreeding, regardless of the harms of incest, propensity for abuse, regardless of our collective disgust, somehow incest should be made legal. And because of that, I want to talk about the boring legal side of things for a minute. And why do we make behaviors legal? This is the burden that my opponent must address. And I don't think shifting the burden of proof here is appropriate. So let's ask ourselves, what is the purpose of the law? And we should be clear. The law does several things to preserve social order. That's its purpose. It does this by promoting or restricting certain behaviors. And how do we know what should be a law in our representative systems? We look at the needs and the values of our communities. If we were to not do this for our laws, then our laws would not represent the values, will, and desires of our people. We cannot call ourselves a self-governing system in any sense. We could not say we, the people, are forming this more perfect union. We are not the government. We are instead ideologically possessed by this liberalism to the extent where our values are actually forgotten. And thus to claim incest should be legal is to claim the values of our community must be ignored in government. Left or right of center, this isn't really a good start. Now, my opponent's spoken of autonomy and liberty. And even if we don't value particular kinds of autonomy or liberty, the law does enshrine some liberty. On that, I'm sure we agree. So the argument then is that this freedom in particular is what ought be enshrined in our law. This is what we should change our law to reflect. And that is a statement of normative ethics, right? Because we value freedom, liberty, autonomy, somehow we must value this particular kind. And this doesn't seem to cash out. For example, I have the freedom to forsake my responsibilities as a husband and father and run away across the country. You have the autonomy to murder someone in cold blood if you so choose. We have the liberty to vote in a fascist for president. But that doesn't mean any of those things are right to do, right? Just wanting freedom, wanting liberty or autonomy does not at all imply an ethical basis to do any particular thing, or even that those things are permissible. And in order to win this debate, my opponent's arguments cannot reference such principles and their continuation as a sufficient basis to warrant such a change in the law. Now, my opponents talked a bit about the utilitarian side of things. The harms of incest, perhaps the pleasure gained outweighs the harms in some kind of utilitarian calculus. This is more appealing, perhaps, because we could avoid some obvious deontic failures, right? We obviously wouldn't will that we all sleep with our siblings or parents. I don't think Kant would agree with that, but hey, who knows?
Well, isn't Kant...
but let us address this as a proper utilitarian wouldn't.
Isn't Kant's moral imperative basically that nothing is actually always good, except for the goodwill? Isn't the entire point of the moral imperative?
I've never read Kant,
So Kant's moral imperative, to my understanding, and Kant's like really hard to read. So I don't fault anybody for not reading Kant, because if you read Kant, something's mentally wrong with you. You need help. You need serious medical attention because you're probably going to be brain dead within the next like couple of hours, right? But to my understanding, Kant's moral imperative is a test that we run towards like different rules and principles, right? So, for example, the moral imperative is basically, can you imagine a world where everyone does X thing to the maximum degree and it is sustainable, right? And basically, what Kant derived in his work, at least to my again, this is to my understanding, Kant's not my strongest subject. Kant derived that nothing actually passes this moral imperative past a good will. The will to do good is the only thing that we could say is always good, regardless of its like a usage. Like if everyone has a good will, that is sustainable, while like everyone telling the truth might not be sustainable, right?
Right. Yeah. I understand that. Okay.
So it's almost really weird that he references like the moral imperative. Like, would you want everybody sleeping with their siblings? When Kant actually hit the point of that work is actually to demonstrate that nothing would pass that moral imperative past a good will. So it's really weird that he references that.
These are better arguments against incest than I'm sure you and I have ever encountered.
Well, most of the time when I argue incest is with a retard. So.
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
I really do wish you got to like debate actual people like this on like stuff like incest, because you may at least find it a little bit more challenging than like the types of people you have to debate right now. But yeah.
Well, I mean, to be honest, I think almost virtue ethics are flawed in a lot of different ways, but I do think that his referencing of the moral imperative is flawed to an extent. Yeah, I don't know. It's very weird to me that like he's referencing that right now. Anyways, let's go back to it because I don't want to like continue rambling on forever.
Should. First and foremost, the harms of incest and inbreeding are nearly unanimously agreed upon by geneticists, psychologists, and sociologists.
Oh, no, he literally just said incest and inbreeding. Those aren't the same thing. Why would he lump those two together?
There's a differentiation there that is missing.
Yeah, no, one of the that's oh god, that's so dumb.
Because Mouthy's going to pick up on that immediately.
I mean, hope
Well,
Mouthy's
if
smart
Mouthy
enough.
should.
Yeah, no, but like saying is the geneticists agree that incest and inbreeding. They don't actually talk about incest. They talk about inbreeding. That's geneticists' job. Everyone agrees that inbreeding is going to produce like negative effects, but that's not the same as incest. Those aren't the same thing. But
So, are you in? Would you be in favor of inbreeding? Do you think?
I think I almost okay. I don't really want to get into the inbreeding argument,
yeah.
but it's really complicated for me because on one hand we can say, well, I don't want people like making genetically fucked offspring, but don't we already allow people to make genetically fucked offspring? Like, don't we kind of go down the path where it's like almost eugenics to a way, where we say like, oh yeah, things like we must consider the moral implications of creating X thing. And then that would also tie into my abortion argument. That's like, I don't think we can even put moral value on things that have yet to exist. So it's really, really hard.
Sure.
That's where I like counter it, almost a eugenicist argument. It's like I don't think that things have moral value until they come into existence, basically.
Right. Yeah.
Unless it's in existence, then like the eugenicists can't like really argue against the creation of that thing because it's already in existence.
Because
yeah.
with that standard, we could like pass laws that ban like Down syndrome people from having children.
Yeah, no, you
I
could.
mean, that would be the other concern. Yeah. Like, you'd be setting a very dangerous precedent, like, legally, at least.
Well,
for that
it's
type
not
of
even a
shit.
precedent. It's almost like you have no reason not to be in favor of this now.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't think most people will be in favor of that. So it's like, where's the difference? Where's the disconnect there? And it seems the disconnect is that people don't understand that we don't really assign moral value to things until they come into existence. So that's
Yeah.
like that one hand. Now, that's really complicated for me. I don't really want to get into the inbreeding point.
Sorry.
I did bring it up to Aiden. I was like, would you almost take like a similar eugenicist standpoint? And he was like, yeah. Which is quite the statement. It's quite the stance.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It is.
It is complicated. It gets really complicated, but I think it's really weird that he's lumping those two together.
Further, we see that it is highly probable that incest is an indicator of abuse. In fact, some people arguing that incest is categorically abuse in all situations. We'll be talking more about that utilitarian calculus as well when we get into children with genetic defects that seriously affect their opportunities, survival, and fitness. And those changes over generation. We see that the longer that a trend of incest goes on, in particular with inbreeding, the higher the risk until finally the gene pool is diverse enough over several generations later to accommodate non-incestuous relations once more. And further, we do see an overwhelming precursor in incest cases, including both homosexual and heterosexual cases, as a severe psychological stressor. In other words, incest is brought on by typically some precursor of death, divorce, or illness of a loved one. And not to mention the fact that psychologists virtually unanimously agree that incest by itself is sexual abuse. But I'm going to conclude with this, right? My opponent must make an argument from normative ethics about a change in behavior, a change in law in our society. My opponent has to claim that now is the time to legalize incest. My opponent has to claim that this represents our shared values despite the near universal tattoo, or that those shared values ought be ignored completely in our democracy. My opponent must claim that incest is less harmful than the restriction of its practice. And finally, my opponent must demonstrate a clear and compelling reason for the legalization of incest beyond arguments from autonomy, liberty, or freedom. And I guess I said finally twice here. Finally, my opponent must prove that incestuous relationships are not categorically abuse. And that's where I'll leave that. So if we want to get into it, I'm definitely excited to explore this argument more.
I don't know if Mouthy
so,
can demonstrate all of that. I feel like that's a near impossible task
Well,
to demonstrate.
I feel like no, he made the claim that it is categorically abuse. I feel like you'd want to like almost push him on that. Like, they haven't backed that
Yeah.
up. They just said, oh yeah, no, it's categorically abuse. Now prove it's not.
Mhm.
Which is a burden shift by definition. He also claimed that Mouthy was burden shifting, but I think he'd also agree on the fact that things should be legal until we have a reason for them not to be legal.
Yeah.
But one thing I do
I
notice is he's making an
yeah.
argument from democracy almost. It's like, oh yeah, we have a shared
Mhm.
value that it shouldn't be legal. Would you think that we should override that? Which is very interesting to me,
Yeah.
yeah.
I also I don't know. I just
Mhm.
again, this debate is very dry. But it seems like I feel like neither of them are going to be able to 100% demonstrate to the other and to the audience like their arguments, and I feel like they're placing such like a high standard rather than just going through like one avenue of like why they disagree with incest.
I hate this university debate style so much. I hate it so much. Like, so much. Jesus Christ, I hate it.
Can you imagine if this is the future of online debate?
It better not be. It better not be. All right, someone's gonna get shot if it is. Okay. No, legitimately, no one's susceptible to this kind of debate. I'm willing to say that. Nobody who isn't like actually spending all their time watching debates is susceptible to understanding what they're talking about. Like, but I feel like nobody else is gonna understand that unless they've watched a university debate before and they kind of already have the tools in their arsenal to understand what the fuck they're talking about.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to point out is I wonder what studies of like social psychologists he is referring to.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because he said that a lot of time that psychologists disagree, didn't he, with incest. He made that claim I think quite a few times. Matthew's opponent did in his spiel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I don't know.
So I wonder where he's taking that from.
But I feel like most of the time when they're talking about incest, they're not talking about like between two consenting like adults. They're talking about incest in between like someone who's like a generational difference of incest, which is definitely a lot different. I don't know. I've never seen these studies before. Yeah.
I've never ever even the people who are the most pro incest, like people who argue, you know, I guess the most radical position on this. I've never seen anyone not argue that there cannot be abuse structures taking place with like consenting adults, or there cannot be like power imbalances when it comes to like family members.
Okay, no, there definitely can be, but I think what you're arguing is that it isn't necessitated by incest, that there is these power imbalances. And I feel like that's going to be largely brushed over by a lot of people who try and like engage in these conversations. Yeah.
Yeah. Alright.
Just like, holy shit, there's just so much to go through right now. It's quite the debate. It is quite the debate. We're only 9 minutes in.
There's a couple ways we could go about this. So obviously there's a ton of points on the table there that I have a lot to say about all of them. So do you just want to start with like one specific point and I can give you my rebuttals and then we can talk about it and then maybe move on to other points later, or do you want me to just sort of like give a broad outline of all the things I caught that I disagreed with?
I was gonna say we can kind of break it up however we want. I think one of the things that I'd like to discuss first, because it is probably one of the bigger points of contention, is that there is such a thing as consensual incest. And my understanding is, from what I've been reading, and I have several psychologists I could cite directly if you'd like, but my understanding is that there's not really such a thing as consensual incest because we're looking at a particular set of power dynamics entering these relationships, and those power dynamics are absolutely a factor in what we'd consider consent. And I don't know how you divorce the family from those particular power dynamics.
Oh, I actually heard.
Okay, so
I heard actually a really interesting argument. I don't know if I'll be able to find it right now. Actually, give me 1 second. I'm gonna actually look in my DMs.
Okay.
Because this paper is so long ago. Actually, I probably can just Google it. The ethics of incest. This is actually where I got a lot of my incest positions from. This document right here. Within this, okay. Well, I don't know if the stream can like. You guys probably can't actually read it, but that's not important right now. Okay. This document actually brings up the idea that like, oh yeah, no, there's a lot of like emotional attachment to these relationships. The problem is that hold up, the emotional center for the individual. I think that's what the argument's called. This paper actually does bring up the idea that, like, oh yeah, there's a lot of relationships that are incredibly emotionally attaching on individuals, so they'd be allowed to engage in those. And I think universally, we almost agree that it's a yes, right? Like, there's lots of relationships that can completely, like, fuck you over, basically. And that's what we're talking about here. Hey, yo, better haircut? Yeah, no, I got my actual normal barber to fix up my haircut, boys. All right, look, it's not that bad anymore. Okay, it's there. We didn't completely fuck it up. Okay. Bunk's haircut is valid. Yeah, based take. Okay, it's
Bunk's
a valid
haircut
take.
is valid.
Based, all right. Yeah, no, but this paper actually goes on a lot. I'm gonna put it in the Twitch chat actually right now, in case anybody on Twitch wants to go over it. A lot of people actually will try and say, like, I got my positions from Destiny, but I think Destiny might have actually gotten his positions from the same fucking paper. I think this is one of the most prominent papers. If you actually look up the ethics of incest on Google, this is like the paper that's gonna pop up. This is like probably the biggest paper that's going to be popping up. I know it's quite the detailed analysis if you actually do have the time to go through it and you want to ask yourself the uncomfortable questions. One thing I do actually get a lot when I talk about philosophy is people will be like, oh yeah, well, why do you want to be asking yourself these questions? And I feel like philosophy at its core is about asking uncomfortable questions. I don't think there's any way to do philosophy without doing that. But yeah, no, it's a really interesting paper. It's a really interesting paper. Anyways, back to the thing.
I guess
What's up,
I'd say
Treason?
like three
Anyways, what's up, Roach Treason? Sorry.
different things about that point specifically. So I would just say, like, firstly, many incestuous relationships I just don't think have this kind of power imbalance. So, for example, if we look at like siblings of similar ages, etc., or cousins of similar ages, there's not going to be. I mean, where's the problematic power imbalance there? And then even between like parents and children or siblings with larger age gaps. I mean, once you're an adult, you're an adult, right? The relationship you have with older family members when you're an adult.
Can we please not get into that's not something that Mouthy has to defend. I don't know why Mouthy decided to try and defend that.
No.
When you're arguing, typically what you want to do is you only want to defend what you have to defend to prove your point.
Yep.
It's very important while arguing. Is you don't overstep what you have to prove. Mouthy's doing that right now. He's doing that right now by trying to defend relationships between like large generational gaps, right? He's doing that right now when he's trying to defend it.
And that is a much harder optical win in these types of debates.
It is. It's such a bad idea. Yeah.
Are going to go, what the fuck? And people are going to make, it's going to be bad. And I've opposed people saying this before. People are going to make the connection that under certain circumstances, people who argue this point would be okay with pedophilia.
Yeah.
And that is like, and that's the problem I would have. Philosophical, like in a philosophy debate, I think it's okay. But I think in like a public debate, when you have a bunch of like normal people to some degree listening to this, I think can be quite yikes.
Well, I mean, I think the thing we have to like almost hone in to is he said once you're an adult, right? Which is the statement, but like also it's not something you have to defend. I don't even think I would defend it. Okay, with my radical position, I wouldn't defend that. Right? I think that at that point, it is to the extent of which we would not be able to understand or we would not be able to see that both parties are consenting. And you might say, oh well, they're adults. Like why can't they do that? And the thing that I'd be against in this situation is, well, there's a lot of things that adults can't do. Lots of adult relationships that we don't permit. For example, employer-employee relationships kind of have the same power imbalance. We can't actually tell if all parties are consenting. And I think I have the same problem with this defense of certain incestuous relationships.
Sure. I want to clarify. Okay. Gosh. So I'm not saying that I think Mouthy is a pedophile. Because I don't, and I've been very opposed to people calling him that before. I am saying that people are going to make that connection, unfortunately. A lot of normal people who aren't used to this type of, like, argument before.
Well, I mean, a lot of people said that I wanted to fuck my sister after the incest debate comes out. Which is very weird of you, because my sister is a little too young for that, okay? But it's a bit of a not great thing, in my opinion. But yeah, no, I don't know.
It just seems like also a massive deflection. Like, you want to fuck your sister is like a way for them to like discredit your argument rather than engaging with your actual points.
Well, I feel like people are almost projecting their inability to actually engage with like unintuitive arguments to an extent. I feel like I'm actually like projecting that to a degree. Like some people would not be able to engage with the idea that incest is okay unless they want to actually do it, which is very, very cringe. It's very cringe if you can't engage with shit like to that degree. Also, this is not my fault. For some reason, Arkham drops the frame rate in this room to like 30. I don't know why.
Oh, okay.
Arkham fucks this game. This game's fucked so hard sometimes. Like this is one of the rooms where it just does not function. Anyways, yeah, no, we'll continue. We'll continue with the
adult is nothing like the relationship you have with them when you're a child, right? I sort of reject the idea that the power imbalance that existed when you were a kid sort of transfers over somehow. And if it happened that the relationship began when the younger person was a child, then there is a problematic power imbalance. But that's just a different issue, because in this debate, I'm only defending incest between consenting adults. And then just two other points. Secondly, I would say, look, there are significant power imbalances in many non-incestuous relationships, right? There are significant power imbalances in a relationship between a poor person and a rich person, or a smart person and a dumb person, or a strong person and a weak person, or maybe someone and their boss or something. But nobody thinks that the state should be able to step in and outlaw these relationships. In fact, people would consider it to be like a serious authoritarian infraction if the state tried to intervene and ban these kinds of relationships. And thirdly, if the concern is preventing abuse, a law against incest is just redundant, right? We already have laws covering domestic abuse, rape, grooming, sexual assault, etc. In fact, if anything, a law against incest might be harmful, right? By outlawing all incestuous relationships, you force them all out of sight and underground, which only makes it more difficult for people to pinpoint the genuinely abusive ones. And additionally, if someone finds themselves in an abusive, incestuous relationship, they're not going to be able, in our current society, to come out and tell anyone about it and get help because they're too afraid of the stigma or the legal penalty associated with the fact that they participated in an incestuous relationship. If it were legal, people would be more free to, would have more of a capacity to get out of abusive, incestuous relationships if they found themselves in one. So, yeah. That's all my claims.
Yeah, I think that your first kind of supporting argument kind of negates your second one, or the second one negates the first. But I think you do have to kind of commit to one, because either you can deny that there's a power imbalance, right, or you can say that the power imbalance exists, right?
No, that's not the argument. He said it sometimes exists, but it's not always existent. What? Okay.
The Turns is in here.
Yo, what's up, Turns? How you doing?
What's up, Bucko?
Yeah, we're talking about incest
right now.
We're talking about incest. Okay, sure. What do you want to talk about, buddy?
I honestly agree with most of your take. So I have no idea. What is there anything you would disagree with me on?
I don't. I think the Holocaust was good.
All right, let's go.
Optics, Bunk, optics.
Okay, give me one good reason, moral or legal argument, as to why the Holocaust was bad.
All right, it was ethically bad because honestly, I agree with you. I can't argue against it. It's in my nature.
The Church is still around. Didn't he do that Lion Maker documentary? Yeah, no, he turns into a Lion Maker documentary a while ago. Now he's a debate, bro. Now he's a Chad debate, bro. Who debated Mr. Batman and took a massive W.
Mr. Batman, the first time I debated him, he fucking, killed me. And then the second time, I studied his arguments for at least, I don't know, 15 hours. And then I was like, okay, well, I know what to fucking say. So then I just stomped on him.
Bro, I told you, I really wanted you to say, what I said, but you just didn't. I gave you an argument in DMs and you didn't use it!
Well, the thing is, I didn't, know what to say. He'd be like, okay, well, how can you back that assertion up? That's what he would say. And I didn't want to have to go through the, well, I don't know, thing. Because, I don't know. Basically, the only way to get out of Batman's argument is to basically just say that the laws of logic and blah, blah, blah are eternal. And then you can also say that matter is eternal because he appeals to science and he appeals to the second law of thermodynamics, which states that entropy makes everything winding down. So that's how we know that there's going to be an end to the universe. Well, that would actually be false, because the first law of thermodynamics says
Matter
that,
cannot be created or destroyed, right?
yeah, matter cannot be created or destroyed. So science would actually contradict with that. So when he asked you, okay, where does matter come from? Like, you can just say, okay, well, we know it doesn't come from anywhere. It didn't have a beginning in the first place.
Well, I mean, the argument I would kind of default to is almost, if God necessitates the laws of logic, then there's no way to logically say that God exists, because God would be outside the laws of logic.
I mean, he was saying, but what are these laws contingent upon? But as I already demonstrated to him, the laws are necessary in each and every world, whereas God isn't necessary, which means that God's actually contingent upon the laws. So it doesn't make sense to ask, what are the laws contingent upon? Like,
Yeah.
God has to obey the laws of logic. He can't not obey them. That's not how it works.
Yeah, no, and then if he didn't obey them, then how would you prove logically that God exists?
Yeah,
he'd be
it would
exempt
follow
for them.
logically that God does not exist, because it would be a contradiction.
Yeah, no, it's very Mr. Batman has a very interesting argument.
I thought it was a really good argument at first, but then I realized it's fucking horrible.
Maybe if Mr. Batman wasn't a decaying corpse, he'd be able to understand his arguments.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyways,
You should have been more disrespectful. You should have been more disrespectful, Turns.
It's hard. I was trying to get my points in, and I don't know. He's fucking scary, dude.
Shut up, you decaying fuck. You're gonna be dead by the time the argument's over, alright? Just shut the hell up. I want you to be able to make it. I want you to be able to finish this argument without dying on the way through, okay?
Shit.
Oh my god. But yeah, dude, anyways, let's continue the Mouthy Infidel debate.
Seems pretty clear to me, but I wanted to return to this notion on, say, similar ages, right? Even with cousins across similar ages, and I can speak to one. I have a cousin who is maybe 3-4 years younger than me, right? I'm 30 now. And my cousin, went and joined the military after I went and joined the military, right? And I've always been like like an older brother figure, right? And there's a question, if I was to get involved in particular ways with him, right? Where my question would be, if it wasn't for this age difference, right, that has him looking up to me, right, just because I'm older and I look cooler to him, and those things, and I've done some things, and I have these certain institutional backings behind me. If it wasn't for that, would he be kind of copying me and doing what I'm doing, right? And it seems like the answer is no, right? It seems like if it were not for that power being there, then he might not have joined, the military, might not have gone off to go do these other things, right? And that seems like a realistic plausibility, right? And if it was the same thing with, any other sexual relationship, like a teacher and a student, like, hey, would that student be having sex with that teacher if they weren't their teacher? Like that's a question that I think needs to be asked when we're evaluating these things. So
no,
I do understand the concern.
All that has to be established by Mouthy is that there is one situation where this is the case, rather than because he's kind of defaulting onto, well, I have a cousin who I have a power imbalance with. Well, that you could also not have a power imbalance.
I
with
was
your
gonna
cousin,
make a
right?
joke then, but I thought it was probably not cool.
Well, tell me, what's the joke? What's the joke? Come on, buddy.
I was gonna be like, when he said, I have like a younger cousin who goes, yeah, and you thought he looked completely fine, okay? You wanted to tap that, okay?
You wanted to tap that ass. Shut the fuck. Oh god. It's so good. That's so good. Oh man. All right. I haven't got any notifications for debate things related to the turns. Well, maybe you should turn on all notifications rather than some, huh?
You noob.
All right. Let's go back.
With the state interfering with autonomy, and I do think that that's a serious concern. I think one way to look at that as well is that we do interfere in autonomous relationships all the time, right?
Sure.
And we do have, particularly when we're talking about surviving legal scrutiny, and constitutional scrutiny, we do find reason to intervene in these private relationships all the time, right? Like we don't remove the restrictions on child abuse. say if someone
Oh
was beating
God,
their
he
child,
did
we don't say,
exactly.
well,
He did exactly what you were going to say. Oh, you don't remove the restrictions on child abuse. I can't wait for him to say, we don't remove the restrictions on pedophilia. Just because it's autonomous doesn't mean you can rape a kid. Oh my God, we're gonna go down that road, aren't we?
Yeah, we are.
Oh man, it's like they don't understand the reason that we say that these aren't autonomous relationships is because we don't know if both are consenting. Both of these individuals are consenting. And this way we'd remove, for example, employer-employee relationships. We can't actually tell if that individual is consenting or not. We don't know. The power imbalance is so much so, and it's in such a dynamic where we have no idea whether they actually are consenting to it or not.
Yeah, so just to clarify, because I know some people in chat are gonna have this question. So you're saying in the reason? I mean, I think everyone understands. I hope. I hope none of you chatters are pedophiles. Okay. I hope everyone understands.
No, Bunk viewers are all pedophiles. Come on.
Okay. I hope everyone in chat understands the reason why we don't allow adult and child relationships.
Mm-hmm.
But when you are saying it's the same reason we don't allow employee and employer relationships, are you saying that on an ethical basis, or are you saying that on that should be something that's legal? Are you making yeah?
What are you talking about?
Okay, wait, because you just made the point, right?
Yeah.
That one of the reasons we shouldn't allow didn't you say employee-employer relationships? So are you saying that employee-employer relationships are unethical?
Yes.
Okay.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah. I don't think we should allow them. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, hold up. I just paused the shit. Anyways, yeah.
we're going to decriminalize beating your child, so that way that can kind of come out in the light and we can address it as a society. And I think most of us would find that to be the wrong thing to do. So I don't necessarily hold that the state doesn't have a place in intervening in these relationships in all contexts at all times.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Okay, so
I gotta object to that point.
There's a few points I would make. The first is just, you said that I can either deny that there's a power imbalance or say that it exists. And my second point and my first point are in conflict with one another. But I don't think they are. I mean, I think the point is just look, it seems like you have this argument.
Oh God, Mouthy's doing such a bad job of addressing this point. It's so bad. This is terrible. Okay, what you say is that this is the default response you should have. I'm not saying that they all do or they all don't. I'm saying that some do and some don't. Mm-hmm. You don't have to. He's doing a really weird way of addressing this, and it's not working. It's just not working.
I wonder with someone who was like Destiny, if Destiny was arguing anti-incest, which is not, but if he was, I wonder how Mouthy would do in a much more quicker, round table type stuff. You know what I mean?
I feel like Mouthy would get crushed with Destiny. I feel like Mouthy would get crushed by Destiny.
Yeah, because but even let's say there was someone similar to Destiny, but he was arguing anti-incest case.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I feel like Mouthy couldn't do well against that. You know what I mean?
Well, obviously not, because Destiny will Destiny is really, really good at overwhelming somebody if they don't know how to handle the pressure, right?
Yeah.
This is what a lot of larger debate bros will almost do, is that people are they're really nervous when getting into a debate with them, and that will lead to them almost being crushed. And I feel like Mouthy's his style requires a lot more space than Destiny would ever give.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You can tell they're doing it right now. They're doing it in turns, right? And Destiny does more of his debates in, I'm going to interrupt you if you say something wrong, and I hope that you interrupt me when I say something wrong, right? I feel like Mouthy would just not be given the space to actually lay out his whole argument, because the argument is multiple different parts. And Destiny, I know exactly how Destiny would handle this here. Destiny would be like, okay, well, I want to address one argument first. Let's go with your first argument, right? He wouldn't allow him to kind of do all these, lay out all these different points.
And I feel like if this guy did that, he at least would have had a better chance at least winning this debate.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. If he had almost Destiny's really good at trapping somebody in. If they're not actually able to get out their points, they're not able to make themselves space. I think I'm actually really good at making my own space in an argument. If someone tries to talk over me, I'm really, really good at shutting people the fuck up. I feel like Mouthy wouldn't be good at that. I feel like Mouthy almost needs somebody to give him space, or else he's not going to be able to actually make an argument.
He does okay when he's talking to Vosh about stuff, but as much as Vosh interrupts, I feel like Vosh probably gives a little bit more space. than Destiny
Oh,
does.
Vosh gives much more space than Destiny does. Destiny is really, really, really quick. Destiny's good at. I think Destiny's really good at arguing at sometimes because he's so quick, like on his feet. Almost in a Ben Shapiro type way. Destiny will kind of lock people down on certain points. And if you're not able to get out of that lock, like you are completely fucked in like an argument. Yeah.
Yeah.
Against legalizing incest. And like premise one of that argument is that like incestuous relationships often like have problematic power imbalances. And the second premise is that if they have these problematic power imbalances, we should outlaw them.
Nice.
And my first point was attacking the first premise, and my second point was attacking the second premise. But the fact that I said, okay, well, even if I grant the first premise, I still don't believe in the second premise for alternative reasons, that's not equivalent to saying that I actually believe that the first premise is true.
He doesn't have
and
to
in
be
addition to that,
this is so
you gave
bad.
this,
I'm sorry. This is such a bad refutation. It's so clunky.
He doesn't have to be. I just feel like he doesn't have to be as they go. Well, you said this, and I said this, and then you said it. It feels like no, you don't have to address it that way. You can just start like attacking his point straight up. You don't have to like go through that whole like long-winded like way of like. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you can lay out somebody's argument in basic form, but I feel like the way he's doing it is almost laying out the entire conversation, which is not the same as laying out an argument.
It takes like 5 minutes.
Yeah, no, I really don't like the way that they're doing this debate. I really hate this university style of debate. Even though, like, formal debate, I have some experience in it, I really hate the way that it lays out compared to, like, an informal debate that you'll see on somebody like Destiny or Vosh's channel. It's just so slow. It is so slow to get to the same conclusion. And it can be done much, much quicker if you're not doing this shit.
This debate could have been done in 40 minutes rather than like an hour and a half.
Yeah,
you
no,
know
definitely.
I mean? Yeah.
Oh god, I think Scarecrow's gonna clip me there. Never mind. No, he didn't. Okay, we're good.
You talked about how, and you said this earlier, that like, look, we do interfere in autonomous relationships all the time, right? But I didn't say that we never should. I didn't say like as a categorical statement we should never interfere with consensual relationships, or we should never violate people's autonomy to any degree by having the state involve itself in their private affairs. My point was that violating autonomy is just prima facie wrong, or prima facie something that we should avoid. And there can be overriding.
What does that mean? What does that Latin term mean? Does anyone know?
I've no fucking idea. Mouthy uses a lot of Latin terms.
Wait, what is it?
Prima fish. Hold up. Prima fishy.
Oh, I don't know that one.
What?
No, I don't know that one.
What?
Okay.
Does anyone in chat know what the fuck he's talking about?
Please, we need help. Okay.
What did he just say?
It's prima facie. I think. I think it's a bunch of. Mouthy. He uses a lot of like old philosophic like Latin terms.
What does that mean? What does it mean?
So it's prima facie, is it?
Facie, maybe? Ooh! I think I found it. Maybe? At first sight, based on first impression, I believe. Hold up. I think I found it. Guys. Alright. Based on first impression, I think, is what it means. What is prima facie in law? The term prima facie is a legal term, or a legal claim, which is made when a prosecution has enough evidence to proceed with a trial of judgment and prove the defendant is guilty. The term is derived from... Okay, I have no idea. Is that what he said? I have no idea. No clue.
I have no... Me either.
Hold up. Maybe philosophy? Prima facie is a Latin term commonly used to mean at first appearance and based on first impression, according to Rose. Prima facie is duty, or duty that is blinding or obligatory. Other things being equal. Okay. I don't care. I don't care anymore. I tried. I don't care.
It becomes okay to violate people's autonomy. But I'm just saying that, like, the fact that we're violating people's autonomy just counts against doing so. Not that it's like a decisive consideration in every case. And so I would just need to be provided with strong overriding reasons for why we should, violate people's autonomy by stopping them from engaging, stopping adults from engaging in consensual sexual activities. And then you also brought up, like, look, we have restrictions on child abuse, and you kind of used that to target my premise about how maybe legalizing incest would allow us to better pinpoint cases of abuse, or or allow people who find themselves in abusive, incestuous relationships to come out and be honest about it, and get the help that they need and report it to the police. And you compared that to, well, we have restrictions on child abuse, but I don't think that's analogous, because we have restrictions on child abuse because doing so prevents abuse, right? There would be no point in, like, if my rationale for legalizing incest is that if someone finds themselves in an abusive, incestuous relationship, I want them to be able to come out and tell the police. And so long as incest is legal or is illegal, it's harder for them to do that, because if they go to the police, they've also committed a crime. But that same logic doesn't really apply to child abuse, because we don't criminalize people for being abused. We don't criminalize children being abused and penalize them and stigmatize them for that.
That's a fair refutation.
Yeah.
And then finally, you talked about this this notion of you told, like, I guess an anecdote about you and your cousin, and about how your cousin maybe, like, looks up to you and thinks you're very cool and so on. But I mean, if we're going to be in the business of saying that the state should criminalize relationships in virtue of the fact that one person looks up to the other person or something like that, I mean, I don't know. I think that's just an absurd standard. I don't think we would accept that in any other case.
Yeah, and I'll respond, and then if you wanted to give your last words here, just so we can move on, and you can pick the next kind of point to address.
Sure.
I don't think it's an absurd standard, because I think we currently recognize it. We recognize it in our institutions, like a high school teacher having sex with an 18-year-old student is something that we tend to take issue with. We tend to dig into their careers and things like that. Possibly in their careers, the person may never teach again. And we find reason to do that, in part because of another kind of phenomenon that occurs here, right? Which is the grooming, and part of incest is the emotional incest, right? A lot of the leaning on and kind of priming, and when we legalize something, we have to be clear about what happens with that, right? And that's going to be there are going to be the opportunists sitting there camping and pushing the boundaries and doing what they're going to get away with. So you have an adult that maybe groomed this child all the way through, a father grooming a daughter perhaps, and then at the end of this time, where this daughter's been groomed at 18, and then the dad says, "Oh yeah, I waited until after 18 to have sex." See, but their entire life they had this kind of like trauma afflicted. And then when we talk about the getting them out of that, if that person does realize it's abuse and they seek help, we're talking about years of therapy. For survivors of incest, the average amount of therapy spent, according to one doctor that was interviewed on CNN, said he spends around 7 years or so with these people in therapy, because it takes that long to deprogram them that they are not a slave for someone else, that they don't owe this to someone else, that they aren't lesser, and that this person isn't kind of a master or knows better for them. And it can be incredibly traumatizing, right? And realistically, these are the types of scenarios that we're going to be just openly inviting in with decriminalization, or more specifically with legalization. So that seems to be the concern there.
Yeah, so I would just say that with respect to, so I caught like 2 points. With respect to the first point,
Okay,
that,
he did give
we recognize that like a high school teacher can't have.
He did give a couple of good pushbacks on Mouthy there. I didn't expect the pushbacks to be as good as that. Did you?
No, I mean, to be honest with you, this person's a lot more intelligent than a lot of people who are going to be arguing his position.
Yeah.
I almost feel, though, once you get into philosophy a lot and you start really crunching on philosophy, you're almost inevitably going to be like pro-incest. It's an actual stance I will take.
What is your general What is your general response to his like scenario of, well, there's a dad who's been grooming this kid, and then the person turns 18 and they won't
I'm
control the person?
anti generational gaps.
Oh, okay.
So I wouldn't even have to deal with that point. Now Mouthy has to deal with it
okay.
because Mouthy is pro that. So
Right.
I don't have to deal with that perspective. You see, I don't have to give a shit.
So do you think generational gap incestual relationships should still be illegal then?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think generally speaking, incestual or generational gaps. If someone's like grown up with an individual, I think we should probably keep those things illegal. I think that's almost
Okay.
inevitably grooming. Yeah.
I actually think your position is more moderate than both Destiny's and Mouthy's then.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't think Destiny and Mouthy make that, like, distinction.
I feel like Destiny has made that distinction in the past, right?
Has he?
I feel like he
I don't
has.
think he has. At least when I've heard him talk about it. I mean, I haven't watched every Destiny video in
No, he said he said before. I
What?
swear to God, he said this before because I remember I was there for the Destiny incest arc. I was there in the DGG. Worst part of my life, by the way. But anyways,
You need counseling for it.
yeah, no, I need severe counseling for that one. But it was he would make a distinction between father-daughter relationships and like brother-sister relationships. He would always make that distinction, and he would keep that distinction very, very clear during his debates with it. At least to my knowledge, yeah. No, actually, hold up. We can look up the no bullshit debate. That's the most famous one, right? I swear to God, he said this. Hold up.
So
No bullshit Destiny.
Oh yeah, the no bullshit.
I've
fake
watched this
Destiny.
one. I
It was
watched
just,
this
like-
one because somebody told me I should watch it. It's so funny.
I told
it's
you
so
that.
funny.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, you did
It's
tell me I should watch it. It's so funny. Hold
so
on.
I'm
him a dumbass 24/7, and then like Destiny's like, well, okay, and then like he just accepts it, and then he continues rationalizing incest. That's basically it.
All right, hold up. Let's get to
throwing heads in the comment section. Wow.
nerd. Anyways,
Nerd.
Like, you made that up. Just said
What?
to make you look bad. That's on you, dog. It's not on me. I'm sorry.
No, dude, it's your show. Your show is terrible. Have consequences. Incest is wrong because you're fucking your family, dude. You want to fuck your kids? That's messed up, dude. You think that's right? You're a fucking crazy person.
Okay, so I don't disagree with what you said. You said that actions can be wrong if they have bad consequences. That's true. That's valid. Okay.
So are we talking about incest or are we talking about actions? You just want to like sidetrack it and not talk about your pro-incest stance because you like to, kind of muddy the waters? Is that what it is?
So right now I'm trying to establish an understanding that, or I'm trying. Hold on, I'm sorry. Let me do another way. I'm trying to make it so that you understand, okay, that the onus is on you. That means that it is your prerogative, or it is in your interest to tell me why an action is bad. Okay. So
No. You invited me to a debate. You said, come on my show. I'm going to take a stance that's pro-incest. So you make an opening statement that's pro-incest.
Okay. Here's my opening pro-incest statement then. Okay. I'm sorry. Tell me if
So
you don't.
you're speaking in support of incest.
Sure. So
On Twitch,
okay, yep, on
2000 people
Twitch.tv.
watching,
Yep,
supported
okay.
by blue microphones.
Yep,
Pro-incest speech. Let's
Okay.
hear it.
So my opening statement would be that I would say incest.
no bullshit. Really pioneered going after someone's sponsors. Holy shit.
Is a morally neutral action like any other sexual activity, assuming no one else is getting hurt. Now you must tell me why it is a moral wrong to commit incest or whatever. Go.
Well, because parents manipulating their kids and having sex with them is a fucked up power dynamic, and it's gonna mess up their heads.
Okay, I don't disagree with that. What about siblings having sex?
Yes. See,
Okay, my bad.
I don't disagree with that. Yeah. All right. So he
Okay,
did.
wait,
He did
wait,
make the
wait, wait,
distinction.
wait.
Yeah.
I need to then ask you a second question.
Mhm.
With generational gaps, let's say a brother and a sister are
Mhm.
like maybe 12, 13 years apart. It's still possible for grooming to occur in that situation, is it not?
Yeah, I'd be generally against that as well.
Okay. Right.
Well, at least if we could establish that grooming did occur. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Sex with an 8-year-old, an 18-year-old student. So that's true, but I don't think that's really, so like the example you gave is just one about, like, look, if we're talking about adults in an incestuous relationship, and maybe like your cousin, as you described it, or anyone's cousin who's like somewhat younger than them, looks up to them and thinks they're very cool and so on, and dates them for that reason. I don't think that the dynamic there is as extreme as the dynamic between a teacher and a student. And the reason for that is because in the case of like a teacher-student relationship, it's built into that relationship. Like like it's a necessary component of the dynamic between a teacher and a student, that the teacher like has the power to like determine that student's life prospects by giving them a failing grade or giving them a passing grade, etc. And so built into the dynamic between a teacher and the student is this element that the teacher has the ability to use like sexual favors as a quid pro quo type arrangement to via threat of penalizing or giving unfair positive treatment to that student. But I don't think there's any analogous dynamic like that that's necessarily built in to a consensual incestual relationship between two adults. And it's also worth mentioning that in large part, in some respects, like, yeah, it's illegal for a teacher to date a student. In some respects, I imagine that has something to do with the fact that teachers work directly for the state, like it's a state institution. But we don't see the government intervening in private institutions or in purely private affairs. Like, we don't see the state outlawing a boss dating a coworker, or a boss dating one of the workers at the business necessarily. That's generally not outlawed.
Wait. I'm gonna hold you up on that, Bunk. I'm gonna hold you up on that.
Yeah.
So, do you think people should? Okay, so I'm wondering how extreme your position is on this.
Yeah.
So, do you think that, like, let's say there's a boss and a coworker, do you think the boss should be sent to jail?
I'm not sure about
Prison?
jail. No, I don't think.
Okay.
I'm not sure about that. That seems a little bit extreme. I don't think it should be permissible.
Okay. Permissible, like within the law, or permissible in society?
Both.
Both.
But things can be illegal without getting sent to fucking prison. Those are different.
Yeah. Okay, so I accept your first point. Then the second point is, I wonder if it would be more effective to make it a more cultural norm, make more than a like legal norm. You know what I mean? I don't know. I'm very like confused about like how we should like go about this. Whether it should be like a piece of legislation, or whether we should like be trying to do this like culturally.
Yeah, sure.
I think that's where I'm split on. Yeah, when it comes to like whether we make it legal or not.
I think any relationship where we can't tell if somebody's truly consenting or not, that the empowerment balance is so much so that we have no idea whether they're truly consenting or not. I think that should be permissible under the law.
Okay.
I think there's some incestuous relationships that are not that though. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Nice haircut, bro. Thanks, Nifty. All right, let's go.
Grooming. I agree that grooming is bad and grooming should be prevented. But I would just say, like, look, we already have laws against grooming, and I'm in favor of having those laws against grooming. And so a law against incest is just to prevent grooming is just redundant when we can just have a law to prevent grooming. And again, I would say, if anything, a law against incest hurts our ability to deal with grooming because it hurts our ability to, by forcing all incestual relationships underground, it hurts our ability to pinpoint the instances of incestual relationships where we can reason that it seems as though grooming or emotional manipulation has taken place, and it decreases the likelihood of the victim of grooming coming out and explaining their situation to other people. So I guess that's all I'd say about the abuse point, but I don't know if you wanted to go on to something else now or
why don't you drive? I picked the first point. I think you should pick the second.
Yeah, so I guess we can go to the genetic disorders thing.
God.
So I would just say that, because you brought up this point a few times about how legalizing incest would increase like genetic disorders, and I would just say, like, firstly, incest doesn't necessarily produce children. So even if we accept the appeal to genetic defects, at most we can conclude that inbreeding should be criminalized.
That took a very long time for him to get around to that, but yeah. Holy shit.
Yeah,
I was like, I figured he'd cut some. I guess he's not like Destiny or like Vosh, and he wouldn't like call that out. Like, it's university professor bullshit, okay?
Did you ever see the Destiny Richard Wolff debate?
No, I've not actually.
That was a debate about social versus capitalism. Richard Wolff did really badly. He did like the Bunk, the Mouthy strategy, you know, just like these really, really long points. And I just feel it's a little bit like that to some degree. It's like I don't think Mouthy's being too long. I just feel like he takes a very long time to get to the point.
I feel like he is being too long even. I think that once you talk for such a long time, it almost hurts and hinders the ability of the audience to actually comprehend what you're saying and to actually pay attention to the important, crucial points. And that's why it's really important to only argue it. You have to. I think that's one reason why that's really, really important to me. Is that you want to hyperfixate on what you have to prove instead of like trying to do this thing where it's like, oh, well, this, and this. I don't think they're gonna be able to actually internalize your points for each of those points.
I also feel like that's true. I feel like part of the problem that happens a lot of the time is not Mouth in particular, but when people who are very long-winded in debates, I feel like they'll do the thing, well, like they did with Richard E. Wolff, well, if you actually understood socialist theory, okay, you would understand everything that he's saying. And it's like, okay, but people don't. And I feel like some of the defenses of Mouthy from Philosophy Bros are going to be, well, if you knew about philosophy, you would know exactly what he's saying. It's like,
I do know what he's saying, though.
Philosophy textbooks.
The problem is, I do know what he's saying.
Most people in the audience don't read philosophy textbooks, okay?
Yeah.
They're not going to really know what Mouthy is trying to get
that's
at.
fine, but it's almost your job as a rhetorician to communicate those ideas. That's your job. Your job is to be able to actually be able to communicate those ideas to an audience. That is your job. If your audience is not receptive to that, then you are doing your job poorly.
I also feel that a good strategy, maybe you might disagree with me. I feel like you should start with addressing the audience's biggest concerns about your position. And then you should move on to like
the nuances between like
the nuances. And I think Mouthy didn't do that. Vosh doesn't do this. Destiny doesn't. It's a really big problem.
I gotta go do something real quick.
Okay.
All right, hold on. Somebody just knocked on my door. I'm gonna go see what the hell they wanted. Okay.
Okay. All right. Make sure to send a subscription. You can subscribe to Bunk Boy SF on YouTube. You can follow Bunk at Bunk is Based. Okay. I was just telling people to like subscribe to your YouTube and shit. So.
Plug everything.
Yeah.
Follow me on every single social media platform. Give me all your money. Empty your wallets, peasant.
Okay. In the great words of Bad Bunny, if you don't subscribe to Bunk, you're just a leech.
You're just a leech, okay? And the great words of Bad Bunny, why the hell not, okay? It's such a base clip. Okay? You can't hate gay people anymore? Why the hell not? If I can hate somebody for wearing Crocs, I can hate them for being a fag. All right, let's get back to the debate, boys. Sorry about that stream.
Not necessarily.
Actually, I'm gonna tell you what I just did. My other uncle, okay, is over. He's over at the house, and somebody wanted me to say hi to him, so I did. Okay. So I just did that. Anyways, back to the debate.
Necessarily that incest should be criminalized. And secondly, there are many other people who have inheritable diseases or who are carriers of dangerous recessive genes, who we don't really legally prevent from breeding, right? We don't prevent people with serious disabilities from breeding with one another.
You see, you can tell I'm literally the smartest person on the planet because I made this point before. So I'm literally the most intelligent person ever, and everyone should just agree with me. Yeah, everyone should just agree with me. I don't see any problem with that. In an ideal world, everyone agrees with me.
If everyone agreed with me, just think about all the great things we could do, okay? Just think about all the amazing things.
Yeah, imagine if literally everyone on the planet agreed that I was right.
One person said, you know how we could pass Joe Biden's agenda? If we had a Joe Biden as president, then we had a bunch of Joe Bidens in the House, a bunch of Joe Bidens in the Senate, and a bunch of Governor Joe Biden.
I agree. We should just clone Joe Biden, okay? We should take Joe Biden's semen and start growing babies out of that, okay?
Oh, and the turns left. Anyway.
Oh, the turns left?
No.
He's a Bunk clone anyway. You know, the turns actually used to get...
copying Bunk.
Literally copying Bunk, alright? It's such a good John Swan clip. I love it so much. I invented live streaming, damn it. Destiny actually cloned me. He actually went back in time and took my idea of being a streamer and replicated that. Yeah. It's true. It's true. Yeah. it's just a true fact. I don't.
And in fact, most of us would consider it a serious authoritarian infraction to prevent these people from breeding with each other. We would consider it like a form of eugenics if we tried to do that. And then finally, well, thirdly, I would just say like the argument assumes basically that a child being born with a genetic defect harms someone, and therefore we can use the law to prevent that harm. But I would just say, who exactly does it harm, right? Maybe you could say that the child is harmed. The child has a lower quality of life due to genetic defects than it would have if it were born to different parents. But I think that this falls prey to the non-identity problem, as pointed out by Derek Parfit, right? If we have a boy named Johnny who is born of inbreeding and has genetic defects, we can ask the question, could Johnny's parents have done any better for him?
No.
The answer is no, right? If Johnny's mother had sex with a different person, she would have just had a different child. Johnny wouldn't have existed. For Johnny, there was no alternative to existing with these genetic defects besides just not existing at all. And then I guess maybe you could say that inbreeding harms society. More disabled people being born puts a strain on society and so on. But it's very unlikely that
Johnny's a
legalizing
loser.
incest would increase
Base.
inbreeding to such a degree that significantly harms society. Most people have extremely visceral negative reactions to incest, probably for biological and evolutionary reasons. There's also evidence for something called the Westermark effect, which says that if you grow up with someone as a child, you fail to develop a sexual attraction to them. So not many people would do incest. Not many of those people who do incest would reproduce. And especially not many of these people would reproduce if inbreeding was also made illegal. And even if this did happen, many of the people who accidentally have incest babies or whatever would likely just have abortions or something like that. So the amount of strain on society that would occur if we legalized incest would likely be extremely negligible, right? There are way bigger problems that we could deal with, right? And it would be even more negligible if we criminalized inbreeding, which I'm not even convinced that we should do. So, and then finally, I guess, like, in a world where incest is legal, people who had an inbred baby would be more likely and more able to explicitly seek out and be provided by the government things like prenatal screening and gene therapy for the fetuses, which are things that we currently provide to people with disorders who have children who say, look, I have a disorder and I had a child, can I receive access to this thing? I would just say that like we have a variety of reasons.
Yeah, what's up?
Were you against inbreeding, or did I get that wrong?
My stance on inbreeding is very much so undecided.
Okay, yeah.
It's very
I just
hard
feel like
to ever. I lean towards it's probably okay if it's okay for people with disabilities to have children. I think that's the only thing I can say consistently. Yeah.
I'm concerned about if inbreeding was to happen. Again, I'm concerned about like, I guess, like it's sort of, this is gonna sound redundant, sort of smoking to me. I'm really concerned about like the pressure that would put on like health systems and disability schools.
Sure.
It just, yeah, that would like concern me a lot, I think.
Couldn't we make the same argument though for like just people with any kind of genetic disorder who have like kids? Like, doesn't that also put a strain on things like healthcare systems and like disabled schools?
That's true. We could. It's such a hard argument. Yeah, I mean, I would agree it could. But I guess then the question is,
yeah,
are you? I don't know the science on this. Are you more likely to have a disabled kid due to inbreeding, or are you more likely to have a disabled kid if you have a partner with Down syndrome? You know, that would then be like my
what if we
question,
could like
right?
determine that two people having a kid would literally just be like fucked genetically, right? What if we can determine that, and then we could also determine that two people who have like a kid incestuously would also have like a fucked baby? Would you say it's like morally equivalent, or like would we bar them both from having children?
Okay, that would be unethical to me to bar them both from having children. On the basis, but I would argue for the Down syndrome kid it would be unethical. On the basis of that the person with Down syndrome can't control that they have Down syndrome. That's not something the Down syndrome person can control. You know what I mean? It doesn't feel
Well,
like
let's just say they don't have to both have Down syndrome. Let's say they just
Okay.
like two individuals who like we know if they have a kid, it'll just be genetically fucked, right?
Yeah.
Like that's basically morally equivalent, is it not?
Is it? Yeah, I guess it is. Yeah, I guess it is. I mean, like you, I haven't like inbreeding is the part that I get really stuck on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I feel like we have to balance so many fucking things. And I feel like there are good arguments for and against. And one day I'll be for it, one day I'll be against it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah.
It's just a really annoying argument. Can we just determine that?
Yeah, it's
Just
it's
not
fucking
think about
annoying. I just you know what angers me the most about this is I don't think like Mouthy had to ever bring up inbreeding. I don't think Mouthy had to bring it up.
Yeah, but like funny inbreeding argument.
I feel like part of you is politically serious, and the part of you just wants people to make really funny arguments.
It's just really funny to watch people 5'2" individuals on the internet fight over things that don't matter. It's funny to me.
Again, I have the same criticism of this debate performance as you do. Is I think Mouthy went down paths that he didn't have to go down.
I know, definitely. I don't think he had to argue like half of this shit. Yeah.
Yeah. I just feel like your argument. With your argument, you never would have gone down an inbreeding argument. I don't think you ever would have touched that.
Because I don't care about inbreeding like at all. It's so dumb. It's really dumb to me.
Because like some people make a distinction. You know, there are some people who are pro, like, well, not pro, but support the idea that incest should be legal, but still think
But not
inbreeding should be
inbreeding.
illegal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know those
There are
people do
those
exist.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen them. I don't know. You just get down in so many weird paths. A disabled person can't control whether they're disabled, but disgusting sodomite incest freaks can. Well, I just gave you the argument where it's like, okay, what if they don't have to be disabled? You could also control if you have kids or not. Like these aren't morally different. Like if we have two people who like, let's say if two people have Down syndrome, they want to have a kid. Like I don't know what the actual statistics of that are. Like, or should they be able to? They can determine if they breed with this person with Down syndrome. Should they be allowed to? Right? It's like, okay, we get so many different weird paths, and it's like I just don't want to talk about it at this point.
To think that
came up to a more concrete position.
Yeah.
Like I just don't think that genetic. So I would just, in summary, like the genetic appeal to incest at best works only as an argument for inbreeding rather than as an argument for incest, and even as an argument against inbreeding, it has some serious problems. So yeah, I guess that's all I'd say.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and I do agree that inbreeding does not apply in all cases. So obviously, we had cases like I brought up earlier, cases of say like homosexual incest, right? Like we're not really worried about a pregnancy from that. Typically, unless we get into you know the explorations of gender that I do not intend to explore in this conversation. But yeah, we can say absolutely safely there that yeah, not every case has inbreeding, that it's not necessarily present. However, it is going to be present as a serious risk in many cases. I can tell you that my wife was using birth control, and I can tell you that my first son was very much a surprise. Right. So a lot of the time, right, this stuff doesn't quite work.
Fucking loser. Okay. Imagine you're a kid and you grow up and you understand that your parent brought you up during an incest debate that you were a mistake. You weren't supposed to happen, Johnny.
Imagine being the cousin, okay? Who this guy said really weird shit about, okay?
Man's really going around and shit-knocking everybody in his family. Oh my god!
How we plan, so even like if we were to criminalize...
Next he's gonna say he was gay and he was really upset that he never had a brother. He really likes the next point, okay?
It's so bad!
if this
Oh,
ends up being an uploaded
God.
segment, Creeper is gonna have to edit some of this.
Oh God, this is so bad at points. It's so
Say
good though.
specifically inbreeding. That doesn't mean that we wouldn't get these children, and that also wouldn't mean at all that these people would be ready to have an abortion or anything like that, or that we even should or shouldn't encourage that. And we're not here to answer that abortion question today, I hope. So it does create a bit of a problem here, and I think. On that non-identity problem, I think the thing that I would want to add there is from Slavascu and Kane on procreative beneficence, and one of the arguments from that, right, is that hey, look, if you were a mother and you were about to have a kid while you were suffering from measles or any other disease that could harm the pregnancy, and you could have chosen, right, would you have? Right. And so it seems kind of similar. And it reminded me, when you brought up that problem, it reminded me very much of that. And the answer seems to be, yeah, of course. Like, if I could avoid this problem, I would have done it. Right. The issue is at hand at this point in time. I can't. Right. And so one of the ways that we do help, one of the things that the law does do is it does serve some paternal functions, right, where it can kind of be used to nudge or direct people towards certain behaviors that wind up being in their own benefit. And sometimes that actually net increases autonomy, right? Which is a good thing, and we do want that in some instances. And I do agree that we should absolutely be concerned with some authoritarian intervention. Is it this? And I think on the inbreeding issue, or specifically on the incest issue, rather, I think you and I just disagree. But I will say this: as far as the harms to society, we do need to refer back to that utilitarian analysis we're kind of sympathetic to as we do this discussion, and we need to not just look at the two participants, but then we also need to look at the life of this child. We're going to be looking at everything there, right? If we're going to do a utilitarian analysis, we gotta do the utilitarian analysis. However we want to maximize utility or mitigate.
Wait, didn't you say
negative
that?
utility, or sorry,
Didn't you say that Mouthy had like a lot of criticisms of utilitarianism?
Yeah, he does. It was part of that fucking 3-hour, which I suggest you watch in your own time because it's not streaming, I would say, content.
Or is it like really dry? Is it more dry than this shit?
It's dry. It's a 3-hour video called Egalitarian Justice, I think.
Oh God. 3 hours? Jesus Christ. Yeah. Oh dear. So why is he like defaulting to a utilitarian framework here?
I have no idea.
Good point. Let's continue.
Mouthy is an enigma, okay? Like the Diary of a Wimpy Kid, okay? Like that, okay? Like.
Are you utilitarian, Bunk? Close enough to it where I say I'm utilitarian. I'm an egoist, technically, if you really want to get down to it. More of a rule egoist, but rule utilitarian is kind of easier to say and makes more sense to most people, so I just gotta say that.
Mitigate pain, right, or suffering for the largest number of people. However we want to approach that, I'm willing to play ball here for the sake of debate, but we got to think about that for all people involved in this. And it's not just the two in the relationship, right? We have an entire society. So when we're talking about using these liberal arguments to say, well, see, they're not burdening anyone else. Well, in a state where your tax dollars are going to fund other people's health care, and this is something that's preventable by not engaging in a particular risky behavior, and that behavior is a taboo, and that behavior is illegal already. It seems like you have some pretty strong reason to not engage in that, and that the community could say, yeah, I really don't want to support all of this extra money, all this extra funding going into these expensive gene therapies and going into all of this, just to say, yeah, your incest is totally, permissible now. The community may say, no, we really don't want the money we're spending on welfare to go to those things because we want welfare for, other situations. And that's okay for the community to do. It's their government. They get to choose. So I think I'll leave it there. If you had any responses for that.
Yeah, so, okay, I would just say, like, a few things. So, firstly, You appeal to the point that some people would still have incest babies, like on accident, even if inbreeding was legal, or even if inbreeding was illegal. And I guess that's kind of plausible. But I would just say that, like, look, the number of people who would be impeded by a law against incest, they would say, "Oh, I really want to have sex with this family member, but I'm not going to because there's a law against incest." The amount of people who would be impeded by that, but who wouldn't be impeded by a law against, like, inbreeding, such that they wouldn't avoid taking risks that could cause inbreeding. I think that number would be very small. I can't imagine this being a very significant amount of people, right? So I mean, like, I guess I just think about it like, like, it's just like the amount of people who would do incest if it were legal would be very low. The amount of people who would do incest and reproduce would be even lower. The amount of people who would do so even if inbreeding were illegal would be even lower. And then many of those people would still get abortions or something. And so it's just very unlikely that inbreeding would increase to such a degree that justifies putting people in prison for incest, even if we assume that inbreeding is a bad thing. And then also, I mean, the argument you're making about inbreeding, it's just the force of that argument is going to depend very strongly on how committed a person is to reducing genetic disorders. And one way to gauge how strongly committed they are to doing this is to ask whether you're also in favor of outlawing relationships between people with serious genetic disorders, right? And I think most of us would not be okay with biting that bullet. And I would also say that with respect to the question about like the non-identity problem and whether or not there's a harm to the child, I would just say, like, sure, I could concede that it would be preferable, because you brought up the measles example. Wouldn't it be preferable for this woman to have a child when she didn't have measles? And sure, I could concede that it would be preferable if a healthier baby was born compared to a less healthy baby. But if nobody is actually harmed, or the only harm is the loss of a potential being from coming into existence and their potential happiness, I don't think that suffices as justification for locking people up, right? I don't think it even comes close. Right?
Yeah, this is shit like this is just why I reject the idea of potential existences entirely. I despise the ideas of some potentiality, like, from coming into our ethical systems. I despise it so much. Because now we're going down this sort of, like, what if this potential being, like, the potential utilitarian benefit of this being existing is, like, outweighed by, like, do you understand how many calculations we have to run in our head before, like, if we're valuing potential beings existing?
Yeah. It's
oh
it
god.
seems like it seems like if you're going to do that, it would be like, a like 500-page book. You would need to, like, calculate that type of stuff.
Like, I don't even think that like system that you're gonna make from that is even workable, like, at all. I don't think that could ever even work. That system doesn't function. God, it's such a terrible. We get into such terrible territory. Anyways, let's continue.
Right? We wouldn't lock someone up for not having sex every time they're fertile because they're giving up the opportunity to bring new happy people into the world. We wouldn't lock someone up for having a baby when they're poor, when it could have had a better life if the parents had waited a few years and had it when they were in a better financial position. We wouldn't, even to go to your example, I think most people would find it crazy to lock someone up because they had a baby while they were on measles rather than having a baby while they weren't on measles. And so, and like, additionally, right, like, even if somebody accepts abortion as being completely fine, we wouldn't say that a woman is, like, morally obligated or should be legally obligated to, like, abort a disabled fetus so that she can have a different non-disabled baby, etc. And so, like, yeah, I mean, I agree with your appeal that it would be preferable if she had a healthier baby, but I just don't think that this is sufficient when we really think about it for, making this activity illegal. And I would say that you brought up the harm to society more broadly. And I agree that we can't just take into consideration the harm done to the two people. we have to consider the harm done to the child. But if I've argued, I think I've argued that there is no harm to the child, right? The child is as well off as he could have been, and if she would have had a child that wasn't inbred, it would have just been a different child, and so the child wasn't harmed. And then with respect to the harm to society more broadly, I agree that should be taken into consideration. I just don't think that the harm to society broadly would be very considerable based on the considerations that I have presented a couple times, just with respect to, like, look, it's not likely that a law legalizing incest, especially if inbreeding is still illegal, would lead to any like considerable or like non-negligible increase in rates of inbreeding and genetic disorders and so on. Yeah, so I guess that's what I would say.
Yeah, and I think let's really focus on that non-identity problem here just for a minute. I think that the issue here is if non-existence would be preferable to, because we're talking about a different child being born, and we can agree to that, right? I could agree to that on my end and say, well, yeah, it would be better in many of these cases where someone's born with, you know, schizophrenia, cleft palate, you know, diabetes, malformed limbs, their nervous system is firing, they're just constantly in pain. We could conceivably agree, for the sake of a utilitarian analysis, like, hey, you know, it would be better for that person to have not been born than it, you know, and some other person being born that didn't have those problems. It seems like that would just be better, right? And that seems to be, you know, if we're going to be leveraging utilitarianism, that seems to be part of the issue at hand. But I did want to touch on some other things, which is, you know, we have other things to factor into this analysis as well. And this is one of the problems with utilitarian analysis. It's not that it's a bad tool for assessing the consequences. It's a fantastic tool. But the issue at hand is there are so many variables to plug and play. So for instance, you know, we aren't just looking at, say, the cost of the taxpayer, which is going to be there. We're not just looking at the health of the child or the health of the family, which are both all of those are very important. We're not just looking at the sexual pleasure or the pleasure that an incestuous relationship gives its two participants, right? We're also looking at what does that do to the family unit. So like you know, and this is kind of the comical example, right? But I just kind of imagine like walking into the Thanksgiving dinner and, you know, and then hearing that, like, I don't know, like my sister, like, and my dad did something, and I would be so just out of sorts, right? The negative, the negative.
I'd be pretty out of sorts if anyone said that. Like, I'd be pretty out of sorts if anyone, like, I just sit down. Okay, no, imagine, right? Come in, right? It's you know, it's Thanksgiving dinner, right? Or any dinner, with anybody, okay? You come down, you sit in your seat, all right? You pull up to the dinner table, and it's like, so yeah, you know, I'm gonna describe in intricate and graphic detail my bedroom life right now to you. Like, come on. It's gonna be... I'd be pretty weirded out, too, you know?
Like, you know, I just went and I just, like, fucked, like, the girl I'm having, like, dinner next to, okay? Never met her before. Just fucked her, okay?
I completely I destroyed that pussy, alright?
Yeah.
It's so... It's such really solid points coming out right now.
He seems to have a lot of weird feelings about certain family members. He should probably
I imagine him coming. I can imagine him coming up to his sister and being like, "Yeah, I'd be very weirded out if you and my father had sex. Be very disturbing. I prefer if you didn't do that." What the hell? All right.
You know, our negative heat-ons here are going to be, you know, through the roof for me. The pain, you know, the pain and the emotional anguish for me would be through the roof, to a level where I could, you know, rationally say, like, yeah, I don't know how good this relationship is for you, but it's so bad for me. And then now you know, now the family unit itself has had this radical shift in, reliability for me knowing how things work in this, right? And that's going to be a source of severe psychological trauma, not just for me, but also other members of my family.
Yeah, me neither.
What is
Me
the
either.
the emotional anguish, like, wouldn't you have this in like a lot of relationships?
No, I think that we
Like-
should
like-
just
like the
ban.
one
No,
person?
okay, no, you have to understand. Okay, I think that this is my new stance. Okay, anyone who I want to have sex with, okay, anyone I'm attracted to, it's going to make me very uncomfortable if they have sex with anybody else. So I'm saying that I think we should ban them from ever having intercourse with anybody but me.
Yeah. If you have sex with Bunk, you can only have sex with Bunk. Okay?
True. Yeah, true. Exactly. I feel like this should be a universal law. I feel like this is really good policy.
You know how we could solve this problem? We just ban sex, okay? We just
Yeah!
make all sex illegal.
Sex abolition. Abolish sex.
After police abolition, then it comes to sex, okay? Ben Shapiro was right, okay? He was right. Yeah, that's what the left wants, okay?
The left wants no sex, okay?
Yup.
The left
That's
is
what
when
left
you have a
wants.
dry ass pussy, okay?
And then, of course, everyone would be able to experience the sex life of Ben Shapiro. So see, it all evens out, okay? It evens out, okay?
Well, it'd be egalitarian good to have everybody in the same sexual life as Ben Shapiro, okay? Look, as a utilitarian, I think we should ban sex. A really long Twitter thread. I can imagine a really long Twitter thread about how evil sex is and how we need to abolish it. I can imagine that being written, and it's going to be very awesome. Oh god, this is such a good debate now.
And with the legalization of this, we're kind of encouraging these things in a sense. Let me correct that. We're no longer discouraging that from really coming out into the open, right? And that seems to be kind of your point here is, hey, we want this stuff out in the open so that we can discuss it, we can have these conversations, we can remove the stigma. But now when we do that, right, we're going to be harming other family members too. And then those other family members are going to go off into the world with that, and it is going to affect other people as well. So, like, if we're going to go this utilitarian route, like, my response would be like, hey, let's really think about this all the way. And my last point on that utilitarian note is we don't just look at this first round of this first generation of incest, where incest is maybe still taboo but now legal, and there's a couple people doing it. We'd also look at the next generation, so on and so forth. As these types of trends gain some amount of traction, which is now that door is open. And so it seems plausible to me that we would see an increase in incestuous behavior following its legalization. We would see an increase in a lot of the negative utility, all of these other family units impacted, and these shifts in the family dynamics that we rely on and that we value.
Wait, does he think that, like, the second incest is legal, everyone's gonna want to fuck their sister?
Yep.
It's a really
Immediately,
weird-
okay?
it's
They'll be
a
compelled
really-
to. They'll be morally obligated under my system, okay? Morally obligated, okay?
No, it's so weird to me when people are like, oh yeah, well, if this is illegal, then everyone's gonna fuck their sister. Like, you have some, like, feelings you want to talk about, buddy?
Yeah. But also, I don't understand this, like, family dynamic argument in general.
Mhm.
It seems like he's made a lot of good arguments so far, but this is, I think, his weakest one.
No,
The family dynamic one is weak.
but, like, it's almost like saying, okay, if the family dynamic is straight, like, let's say I'm in a family and my father's, like, really, really racist. I had to say to date like a black dude, right?
Mhm.
Is that wrong? Because that
Because
hurts
you're
the
a
family
colonizer?
dynamic? Yeah? Is that wrong? Is that morally, like, impermissible? Is that... Like, I don't know. That seems to be,
Yeah.
like, what follows. I don't think we'd agree that, like,
Mhm.
it'd be wrong for me to, like, have intercourse with somebody just because, like,
Yeah.
my father doesn't like them, right?
Mm.
I think that could extend to, like, any other relationship, too, but it's just really
Yeah.
weird to me. It's really, really weird
It's
to me.
like,
Yeah.
this guy's obviously a conservative. I'm pretty sure this guy's a conservative. And the reason I say this is that he seems to think that, like, mum and dad, like, should have, like, a heavy influence over your life for a very long time,
Mhm.
past the age of 18.
Yeah.
And so this seems like way more of a tradcon argument than just an anti-incest argument.
Yeah, this argument's really odd to me in general.
Mm.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like you almost have to default to an argument like this, though, if you're going to be arguing against somebody.
against instance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God, we get like such
I don't
terrible
know,
arguments territory. Yeah. Go for it.
He could have argued a position of social stability without like the family dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And I just don't know why he didn't stick to social stability rather than including the family dynamic, which seems a very weird route.
Mm-hmm.
That it just seems unnecessary for him to go down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh God, it's such a weird. We get into such terrible argument or like territory with arguments when we go down in the incest thing. That's something I've really noticed. Is you get to like such terrible arguments so quickly. It's quite the thing. Yeah.
I also think this is where Mouthy should really be trying to direct the conversation somewhere more productive here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my concern as well. Why isn't Mouthy like intervening and directing the conversation into somewhere that's going to lead to maybe some more productive like discourse being done? Because it doesn't seem like this route is productive.
Well, I think that it's almost beneficial to Mouthy to not. Because if you just let this guy waffle on and on and on about stuff that like nobody else is going to understand, it's not going to be beneficial to him. You're just basically going to be burning a clock and it's going to sound nonsensical. I feel like the second you try and divert the conversation to be more productive, you almost are like assisting him in a way. Yeah.
Sure.
What am I supposed to do? Locate Dr. Young. Okay. I'm playing fucking Arkham and I have no idea where I go next because I forget. I forget. No, I played Arkham a while ago. It's been a while since I played the first Arkham game. It was kind of given to me by my uncle when I was very, very young. And it was a fun game. I love the Arkham games. I especially love Arkham Asylum. I love the atmosphere that's around in Arkham Asylum, but holy shit, it's so confusing. If I'm not paying attention to like what people are saying I should do, like, I don't know where to go. Like it just says find Dr. Young. I don't know where Dr. Young is, and I forget. I don't want to remember. All right, let's continue the video.
And the corresponding increases with costs and things like gene therapy or things like abortion services, all of this stuff. So the harm, the feasible harms that we're dealing with for the sake of utilitarian analysis are not limited at all to the gene node or to the genetics node. But that's pretty much all I have to say on that point.
Okay, so I would say like a few things. So, it seemed like you agreed that sure, like there is no like actual existing kid who's harmed. I'm just saying that like from a utilitarian perspective, it would be better if there was a more healthy kid. And like again, like I agree with that. It would be better for like if a woman could either like have an inbred baby or a non-inbred baby. Just looking at the utility of the like that the non-inbred baby would experience throughout its life versus the inbred baby, I would say that it's better. It would be preferable for the non-inbred baby to be born. But my point is just that I don't think that like I think that if we're acknowledging that there's no real harm to anyone, it would have just have been better if she would have brought a different person into existence than the one that she brought into existence. I just don't think that that's enough to justify like locking people up over this, right? So like again, like if there's like a woman who is like with someone and she's like pretty poor, but she knows she's going to get a promotion in like 3 years, and then she's going to be in a much better position, and she knows that if she waited like a few years to have the baby would have better developmental outcomes and would have a better life because it would grow up in a more economically prosperous situation. But she nonetheless, just out of passion, saying, no, I want a baby now with you because she was so in love or something. And then she had the baby. I don't think that we would think it's okay to lock her up for that. I don't think that we would even say that a moral obligation she had was broken. I would say that she didn't do something that most of us would consider like supererogatory, meaning it's not morally obligatory. It just would have been morally preferable if she'd have done otherwise. But it would just be completely overbearing and absurd to hold her to a moral obligation to bring the best potential person into existence and so on.
Are you guys live?
Yes.
You brought up a few other considerations in addition to
So close.
Shut up.
the like the harms to society, like, you know, the healthcare costs and the genetic therapy costs and so on. And I think I've mostly addressed those kinds of considerations, so I don't want to go back over it again to like, and you know, like waste everyone's time by just me giving rebuttals again. So I think we probably just have reached a stalemate at that point. So I guess I'll just move on to some other things you said that I haven't addressed. You brought up the harms to like family members, like the harms to the family unit. I would say like a few things about this. Firstly, not all incestuous relationships threaten the family structure to a especially concerning degree. So, for example, like, you know, maybe if a father dates his daughter, the wife might be really mad, but if two siblings date, how does that really harm the family, right? The parents might be angry, but I mean, that's kind of just the parents' problem, right? Kids disappoint their parents all the time.
Example,
maybe if they're in a
me.
relationship and they...
I can confirm. Direct experience, in fact. Oh.
Same.
Well, first of all, autism. All right, I'm autistic. That's an L. All right, and then secondly,
like,
I'm political
wow,
Twitch
you
streamer. Which you can't get anything worse than that, to be honest with you. An autistic political Twitch streamer? I kill myself, all right? Anyway.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah.
Wrong, was there something you wanted to say? No? Okay.
Incest is morally neutral.
Good for you, buddy. Wrong, you can't just steal all my takes. You know that, right?
Technically, I got it from Destiny, so.
You're a DGG. Get the hell out, okay? DGG scum.
Come on. Wrong can stay.
I'm sorry, I just hate DGGers with a passion.
You're a DGGer, but big oratory.
What now?
You're a DGGer. Okay.
I'm sorry.
You're a DGGer, but derogatory.
Derogatory, do you mean?
Derogatory?
Derogatory.
What are you trying to say?
Real big brain stuff out of Wrong's mouth right now. Holy shit.
Okay.
They break up, that causes tension. But with many families, there's loads of tensions between family members anyways, right? It's not like the family ends if siblings don't get along or have some tension or jealousy or something like that. Secondly, the integrity of the family, I would say, simply isn't a legal matter, right? Sure, if a family breaks up, that would be sad. But, I mean, we're not going to send people to prison over a family breaking up. That's absurd, right? It's just a private affair. And thirdly, this argument, if taken to its logical conclusion, would lead us to conclusions that nobody would support, right? Should we outlaw homosexuality in like a homophobic society because a kid coming out as gay in a homophobic family would break up the family? Should we outlaw inheritance, which causes intense rivalry between family members who each want to inherit the stuff of a dead family member? Should we outlaw divorce, which clearly breaks up families? Of course not, right? Nobody would accept this. And fourth, I would say that this argument just undermines itself, because sure, incest might break up families, but another thing that breaks up families is imprisoning people over who they have sex with, and that's exactly what a criminalization of incest does. I would additionally say, because there was also a sort of appeal to family roles, like we all have specific roles in a family, and we don't want that being messed with. And I would just say, sure, family members have certain roles and duties to each other, but the only roles that we generally think the law can enforce are things like don't neglect your children, don't abuse your family members, etc. But beyond this, the roles and duties different family members have should be decided by the families, right? We don't throw people in jail for having alternative lifestyles or for having unconventional roles. Secondly, an incestuous relationship need not be especially alternative. There's already a great deal of variety with respect to how family members relate to each other across different families. In some families, siblings are best friends. In some families, siblings hate each other, etc. So why should sexual attraction suddenly violate these roles in an especially egregious way? And also, finally, I would just say that this would apply to many common and accepted things, like I already said with the last point, which is just like this would favor, the same consideration would favor outlawing like divorce or inheritance, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, you brought up that we can't just look at the first round. We'd have to look at the ongoing impact over time of legalizing incest, right? You said that like legalizing incest could cause big problems over the course of many, following generations. And I would just say that that's certainly possible. But again, if we're going to say that we should make something illegal, it's not enough to say, well, there could be these potential side effects over a long period of time. You'd have to give a compelling reason for why we should actually expect that to happen. And I wouldn't expect that to happen to a considerable degree, because like I said, like most of us, like I feel a little uncomfortable when I just talk about incest, right? It's gross, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most of us think incest is gross, and I don't think that's just a cultural thing. I think it's a biological thing. There's a lot of evidence for that. That it's like it makes evolutionary sense why we would have a natural aversion to incest, and it would also like I said earlier, there's this psychological effect called the Westermark effect, which basically says that it's when you grow up with someone as a child, you're generally speaking almost certainly going to fail to develop a sexual attraction for them. And so, like, I think we have good reason to think that even if we legalized and even if we destigmatized incest,
Mm-hmm.
not enough people would start doing it, even over the course of many generations, for this to cause some substantial problem or some substantial drain on our resources or increase in genetic disorders among the general population. I just don't think we have reason to think it would be that big of a problem.
Sure.
Yeah, so there's a lot there to unpack, and I just wanted to say I what I'm wary of the most is and what I would like to really make sure we both avoid for this debate is trivializing the marriage equality movement, and all of the progress and work that LGBT relationships have had to go through in order to kind of earn their place in a family unit in America, right? And I think that we can point to some different things here. Now, I know there's one fact you and I agree on, which is, or disagree on rather, which is that, incest is categorically abusive. But I think it's fairly clear that gay marriage is not, right? And so even with that shift in the family dynamic, there's a difference here. And this is a move that's seen a lot online with a lot of people that are supporting incest, is to try to co-opt the language of the marriage equality movement to go after this.
Yeah, you degenerate.
But we have to look at the legal reality, right? The legal.
I just hate when people try and do this like virtuous bullshit where they're like, "Oh, don't undermine X, Y." Shut the fuck up! Holy shit!
Yeah, don't undermine me, Bunk.
Just
Don't undermine
refute
me,
it.
okay?
Just refute the fucking point, you spaz. Holy shit! Shut the fuck up! I just hate when people try and like come up as like the moral high ground during a conversation. It's so AIDS. It's so annoying. Holy shit! Surely I can't be the only one who feels that way. Come on.
Okay, so what would be your response to, you are trivializing the marriage equality movement and the suffering of gay people?
That's a great point. Now, can we get the refutation? That's great. Good for you, buddy. I'm happy for you.
But are you engaging with his actual arguments? Bunk?
I think I am. I think I'm the only one engaging with actual arguments at this point. Holy shit. It's such a dumbass point. Holy shit. Just shut the hell up. Oh, God.
It was funny how Matthew was like, and I don't like talking about incest. I think it's gross. Ha! Debunked Bunk. Even Matthew thinks incest is gross.
I think incest is gross. That doesn't mean I can't have a stance on it. Jeez.
No. Because he's simply arguing, simply saying that. Yeah, if you say it's, you can argue, say it's disgusting, right? But it's not more. But what we're arguing is like it's more. Is it morally wrong or something like that, right? Disgusting and morally wrong are two completely different things. That's kind of fucking dumb.
I mean, if somebody was arguing in favor, like if somebody asked me to argue in favor of like us being allowed to piss in each other's mouth, like legally, I think I'd be pretty disgusted as well. Okay, shut the fuck up, you degenerate. You fucking D-Gen. Holy shit. But yeah, no, it's such a...
Hey, we have to make humor, okay? It's not like the real original debate is like really
It's not that
made for mass
funny.
consumption or anything.
It's not that funny. Honestly, it'd be much funnier if we just started insulting the other guy. I think that would like improve the debate so much.
Lol.
Is it so boring? Like, I mean, you can have an intellectual debate, but I'm like,
But at least cyberbullying them a little
yeah,
bit. Jeez.
exactly. So dull. It's like, I don't know.
If Bunk is not able to call a person the arse-lid once in the debate, it's not a debate for him.
No, it's
Exactly.
not. Imagine not even busting out a few slurs during a debate. Jeez.
So boring.
Unbased and cringe, okay? Oh god, alright, let's get back to the debate. I sped it up a little bit because it's taking so long.
Reality-wise, made quite evident in California with Prop 8. And the reality is that gay marriage is clearly constitutionally protected, and there's no grounds for that restriction. Whereas incest is not, right? Which means that, hey, these pre-existing bans, right, as far as motivating the scrutiny required to either get them overturned in the courts or to legislate against them, right, that burden has to fall on the person advocating for incest legalization. That's simply how the legal system works. The legal system's not going to sit there and justify the law as it is. Rather, we have to see that there is a demonstrable harm with damages attached, right? That needs to be taken into the legal system, or you need to then go and get the rest of the people to go ahead and vote on that, or vote legislators into positions of power where they can then go ahead and craft laws around incest to legalize it and overturn those previous restrictions. But I also wanted to turn to why the family unit is important here, and why certain changes are acceptable and certain changes aren't. And the very simple solution is that we have shared values as a society. We have shared values in our subcultures, including our families. And yeah, you're right to point out that those values do differ between family units, although they are kind of generally homogenous, right? And that's what we see. You know, a child's in a position where they look up to their parents 99% of the time for support, for care, for the things that they need. And those are good things that we should be encouraging. We want parents to support their children. We want children to look to their parents for that support whenever possible. And part of the reason we have family courts, as you kind of alluded to, right, is to ensure that that support's happening and ensure that those things are being met. Now, you talked about imprisonment and how that breaks up the family unit, and we can absolutely discuss at great length how the prison system harms people of all kinds. And I think this is our first real conversation. You know, one of my education goals is kind of looking at, hey, could I become that public defender so I can help people avoid prison? And because it does terrible things to them. And I think you and I can agree there. However, there is a distinction between should we fix the criminal justice system and should we legalize a behavior? In other words, just because the criminal justice system is terrifying in the United States does not at all imply that we should just pull the laws back up off the table and allow free reign.
I think we should. Anarchism should reign.
In my mind, is not really relevant.
What?
Okay, now, I just have a hot take, okay? Now, this is just an idea about how we just crime, okay? Let's just legalize murder. Okay, let's legalize
I agree!
murder.
Base!
Yeah.
I think the Holocaust, okay? I'm not gonna...
Bunk.
What I'll say is, Hitler killing himself really broke up the family unit, okay? The Germany's defeat really did fuck with their family units, didn't it? And what I'm trying to get at here is that, what if it didn't?
Yeah. What if it didn't?
Let's think about the good ending, okay? The good ending is where Germany... It's not. I'm not gonna finish that sentence. We're gonna abandon that right there, okay?
Yeah.
You know, one of my friends was talking to me the other day.
Baby steps.
One of my friends was talking to me the other day about Wolfenstein, and he said, "Yeah, this is like the world where the Nazis actually won. They won World War II." And I said, "Oh, so it's the good ending."
Bunk! Oh my god.
So it's the good ending.
Bunk, we are literally fucking live, okay? We are live! We are live!
No, please, Punk. What do you mean?
No, wrong. Okay, look, okay. Nobody should take optics lessons from wrong, okay?
Nah.
Wrong, you should go distribute some child pornography, okay?
Bunk!
Later.
That's not the response I wanted, okay?
Later, bud.
Stop, Ron, stop.
I said as in me.
We are in bad optics territory right now. We are in bad
You
optics
think?
territory.
Really? Really?
We are in...
I just said the good ending is when the Nazis won, okay?
Yeah, you don't have to fucking say it again.
It's a good take. It's a good take, okay?
So joking.
Alright, let's go back to the debate.
To the argument at hand, we need to be talking about better ways to deal with these things. So that's something. Now, you also wanted to bring up why sex among family members is, some kind of exception to this, right? Why is this the exceptional thing here? Well, sex is kind of a bit of a very sacred, or for those that don't like
Oh,
that, it's a very
no.
personal thing.
It's a very sacred and personal. You mean like interpersonal relationships are kind of sacred and personal, or are we talking? It's such a dumb argument. It's so much like it's so circular. To say sex is different because sex is different is a tautology.
Yep.
It's a really dumb conversation now. Oh god, we just like went right off the rails, dude. I'm thinking, I thought this guy might actually.
Thing.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I thought it was gonna make some good points.
Yeah, me too. I thought this guy was actually gonna be intelligent. Now we're like at sex is sacred level like argumentation. Oh god.
Wait, how is okay? Tell me, how is sex sacred? Like, it's not.
We know you don't think that wrong because you have an alt account where you post dildos and how you use them, okay? Chill out, buddy.
Sex is. Oh, okay.
Giving something to someone, you are changing your dynamic. And if you were to have sex with a sibling, there's a high probability that depending on where things go, that may create some irreconcilable differences down the line in your relationship. It's one thing to have a sibling; it's another thing to have to break up with them later. And that's the type of thing that we need to be looking at here. This isn't just awkward Thanksgiving dinners we're talking about, right? These are long-standing relationships. We want people to be able to lean on for as long as they're alive, because we see that those are good, right? We see that the family provides these types of support, and it's good. And when we throw sex into the ring in many of these relationships where it's not appropriate, we do see that those relationships can be compromised. And finally, I wanted to turn to that Westermark effect. When you grow up with someone being less likely to develop a sexual attraction, I think is true. I'm not going to go Freudian here or anything like that. What I did want to say though is, and I don't want to just rehash whole points, but when we talk about the emotional incest, we talk about the grooming, we talk about those things, and we talk about those going under the radar.
Speaking of Freud had some really good ideas about how he wanted to have sex with his mother.
Bunk.
I don't think we should default to Freud for the sex incest takes, okay? I'm just saying, Freud had some good ideas.
Floyd? George Floyd?
Freud. Sigmund Freud. You.
George Floyd. I'm dead.
Get kneeled on.
No, we can't say that in the same sentence as George Floyd.
Wrong.
That's bad optics. Disavow.
Disavow. Okay. Wrong. Would you like Bunk to still have a stream in a week? Just a real serious question. Would you like Bunk to still have a stream in a week?
Keep streaming, Bunk.
Can we not go into bad optics territory for 10 seconds, guys? We're in a stream right now.
Because that one, okay, is really bad, okay? But in fairness, Bunk, you just made a Holocaust joke, okay? So,
yeah, I blame Bunk now.
Okay, so we have to entertain the stream until Bunk gets back. Alright.
Bunk, no! Okay,
Hello.
guys. So,
okay, no, but wrong. Okay.
Okay, get this. Apparently I shouldn't scream. The Holocaust is good.
Who said that?
The people I live with.
What did they say to you? No, now we need to...
Apparently I shouldn't scream. The Holocaust was a good thing. Who would have thought?
Wow, it's like wow, it's like
come on.
My optics advice is reoccurring in your life, automatically.
True.
This is what Orwell warned us about, okay? Literally 1984. Okay.
Yeah.
Very much 1984.
Right, those are the types of things that I think would probably be likely to maybe override that observed effect, and that is worthy of note. So children can be groomed to do all kinds of things, which is definitely concerning for those of us that are against child abuse. And a lot of those behaviors can carry over into adulthood as well, and continue to impact their lives in severe negative ways. So I hope that wasn't too much word vomit.
Yeah,
I'll let you go.
yeah. So I would just say like, I mean, there's quite a bit there that I think there's quite a bit there that I think I've previously spoken to. So like you said, like because I brought up the comparison to homosexuality because you said, you know, we should make incest illegal because if an incest happens, it might make like the parents upset or something like that, and therefore, you know, it should be illegal because we don't want to break up families. And I just said, well, look, a child coming out as gay in a homophobic society will also likely break up the family or cause tensions in the family. And I don't think anyone would say that therefore like coming out as homosexual should be illegal, right? Because I just don't think that like this is a legal matter, right? Like similarly, like we wouldn't say that like inheritance should be illegal, even though inheritance can cause all kinds of conflicts between families. We don't think divorce should be illegal, even though that obviously like necessarily breaks up families, etc. And then you sort of responded to my comparison with homosexuality by saying that well, incest is inherently abusive and homosexuality isn't. But I think that's just sort of at that point you're just making a different argument, right? Because now the argument isn't that incest should be illegal because anything that breaks up families should be illegal. Now the argument is incest should be illegal because it's sort of inherently abusive. But I think I've also spoken to that because I would just say like I don't think incest is inherently abusive. What's the super problematic power dynamic between siblings of a similar age? And even if we're talking about siblings with large age gaps or parents, you know, the relationship you have with your family members when you're adult is not the same as the relationship you had with them when you were a child, and there were these problematic power dynamics. And then if the relationship didn't start when they were a child, then that's just a different issue, and that's something I would oppose, right? And so, yeah, I made all sorts of arguments about the appeal to abuse. That was just one of them earlier, so I guess I don't want to rehash too much of that. You also said that, like, look, as a matter of fact, incest is just not legal and homosexuality is. Look, I would just say that, like, if the conversation we're having is should we as a society elect a government that will make incest legal, whether or not incest currently, based on the government we have, is illegal, is not really going to bear on that normative question.
It's really...
you also
it's really, really weird to me that it keeps defaulting back to, well, it is illegal right now. Like, that's not the argument. That has nothing to do with what we're talking about.
Yeah.
That's like saying, if we're in like a homophobic society, it's like saying, should being gay be legal? And someone says, well, it's not. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah?
This, it feels like they're going around in circles at the moment, you know?
It does. It does. We get it, Bunk. It's like you want to bang your sister. My sister is 12. Firstly. Okay. And secondly.
Please call the FBI on that person.
Owl.
You need to call the FBI.
Owl, consider this. All right, consider this. You just imagine me being in a relationship with someone who's not of age. So you're basically a pedophile, exposed. Yep. Literally exposed, okay? You're done for, buddy. You're done for, buddy. All right, let's go back to the funny.
Children look up to their parents most of the time, and that this is like a very consistent thing we find in families, and we have family courts to ensure this kind of thing. But I don't think we do, right? I mean, there are children with a very different relationship to their parents. So I've known people who don't really look up to their parents as like, you know, in this authority-like way that most people do, but rather they're more like friends with their parents, right? Like their parents, like, you know, have that more sort of peer relationship with them. And we absolutely don't outlaw that or have family courts step in to say, hey, no, this is the specified role you have to have with your child. And if you deviate from that, you're going to be locked up. Because generally we just think that this isn't a legal matter, right? Like whether or not people want to have different roles or, you know, alternative ways of having relationships within their families, it's just not going to be something that's condemned by the state. And, you know, you said that the prison system harms people of all kinds. It's very harmful. But just because the legal system is harmful doesn't mean that we need to legalize something. And I would agree, it doesn't necessarily mean that. But I think it weighs into the calculation, right? Like if we have a prison system and when we put people into that prison system, it causes them a significant degree of harm, then the harm that causes is going to weigh into the moral calculus when we're talking about whether or not we should create a situation wherein we're throwing people in that system for a particular reason, right? It's not, again, it's not, I didn't say it's a decisive consideration, like, we should we should legalize murder just because it harms murderers to put them in prison. Obviously not. I'm just saying that, like, the harm caused by the prison system counts in favor of us not throwing people in there, and so we just need, like, an extra strong overriding reason to justify it. You also talked about how, you know, sex is a very personal thing, and if you have sex with a sibling, that makes things weird. If a breakup ends up occurring, I think I also spoke to that a little bit earlier when I addressed the broader appeal to family dynamics, so I don't want to go over that again. And then you also talked about the Westermark effect, but you think that grooming can override that effect. So, you know, if a child is groomed by their parent, they might end up having sex with them, and that's bad, and I agree that that's bad. But again, I'm just going to say that I addressed this earlier when I talked about the abuse thing, which is just to say, like, first, we already have laws against grooming. and also we have reason to believe that laws against incest can make laws against grooming less effective. And so, yeah, I guess that's what I would say.
Yeah, and I'm going to move on after this. Whenever you're ready, I just have a couple quick responses here. I'm wary of missing the mark on my point there on gay marriage and the legalization of gay marriage. I'm pointing to constitutionality, right? And I'm pointing to, hey, look, we have this document, which I think we would generally argue as either a legal or ethical document. I think it's kind of like a meta-legal document, if you will. That's kind of my preferred approach to the Constitution. And you may agree or disagree with that, but it's kind of a code of conduct or kind of a standard for us to look back at and assess our laws with, right? And so the point there was that, hey, look,
legal document. Oh god,
anti-incest laws align with constitutional scrutiny. They have the overwhelming amount of legal analysis is there. I can provide you some links for that if you like. But they have survived that level of scrutiny, and so it's not that just because it's legal.
Is he saying it's anti-constitutional, so it's bad?
I don't know.
Yeah, wait.
What is this dude? Where does he live? What world does he exist in?
Personally, I just don't like the gays. So,
you know what? We would love to like be nice to gays, but unfortunately, like our constitution, okay,
it says gays are bad.
Gays are bad. So, you
can see right here that it says you shouldn't be a fag. And therefore, I will conclude that that's the good thing. Okay. Oh god.
You were doing so well that you had to say.
It's based. It's based. Okay. All right, let's get back to it. We're almost done.
Well, that means it's right to be legal, or just because something's illegal, that it's right to be illegal, right? I think you and I can agree that that's not a sufficient basis, and that's not my argument. I'm also wary of the phrasing around the family court thing, and I just wanted to offer for clarity, right? My point is that it's about ensuring a certain dynamic is occurring in that family, right? Now, yes, we do have to leave that door open for some autonomy, and I think you and I agree there, right? But in instances like someone not paying child support, or neglecting a child, or abusing a child, I think you and I both agree that yes, these are good things for family courts to be looking at and to be prescribing certain courses of action, corrective action for those. But my big hesitation here, and I think kind of maybe the springboard into our next topic, might be that I'm wary of the fact that there's not really a clear way to demonstrate these damages such that, let's say that you committed an act of incest and got popped for it and went to court, and then you tried to argue it on constitutional grounds, or you tried to argue that the law somehow was harming you. I don't see that. I don't see that because I think the state has compelling interests, both in preventing the public backlash and outcry, both in protecting the welfare of the participants involved. I think that the state would say, hey, look, under the scrutiny, the various levels of constitutional scrutiny we apply towards these laws, and we look at it, we're looking at laws that we have in power that are popular, that are consistent with the values of our people, and you're coming in here saying that harmed you, but you knew the rule, right? You knew the rule. And to them it will ring like, hey, look, the murderer complaining, kind of like that example you brought up, the murderer complaining of the murder restrictions, the homicide restrictions harming them. They're just going to say, hey, look, I don't see it. So if you can't bring it to court to legalize it, right, then how do you have the grounds, to contest it otherwise, right? And so you have to. It seems like you have to push for a different shift, and this kind of gets back to one of my arguments, right, which is you would need to get the people to agree that incest is morally permissible, or morally a non-issue, prior to saying that it would or should be legalized, that we should take a legal action, right? We would need to have that agreement among the people, such that we're ensuring that they're represented. Otherwise, you're going to need to demonstrate this autonomy principle somehow from this autonomy principle that, hey, this is such a harm to autonomy that if we don't allow it, we're just perpetuating this grave injustice. And I don't see that, and that's what I'm struggling to see. So if you could help maybe shed some light on that part of your argument, this autonomy part, and how I get from autonomy and liberty and those principles to I should be able to engage in incest if I want to. It's not really the government's business. The government should back out of it. That would be fantastic for me.
Okay, so I would just say, like, firstly, with respect to the idea that incest criminalization isn't unconstitutional, I don't know if my argument requires that incest criminalization be unconstitutional. At most, my argument would require that legalization of incest is not unconstitutional. But insofar as both are constitutional, I think I can still say, like, hey, I think this law is preferable to this other law based on these normative principles that I can articulate, and that I think most people would come to agree on reflection, especially if they share the sort of liberal view of consent and legality that I articulated, and that I think most of our laws surrounding sex are most consistent with. And so you also said, like, if you can't appeal to the courts, how would you make incest legal? Well, I mean, presumably we could just like pass a law, through Congress or through whoever. I mean, there already are places in the U.S. Well, actually, I don't know if places, but definitely in Ohio, incest is legal, right? So, I mean, we can just pass laws that make this the case without necessarily appealing to unconstitutionality in the court structure or anything like that. And you also said that we need to, unless I can prove that we're perpetuating like this especially strong injustice by allowing incest to be illegal, then we have no basis on which I can say that it should be decriminalized or legalized. And I would just say, like, I think it's the other way around, right? I think that in general, if someone wants to make something illegal, the burden of proof is on them to provide strong reason why it should be illegal. Because otherwise, right, like if I asked you, like, why should it be illegal or why should it be legal to, I don't know, collect snow outside of my house or like build a snowman, you would just like look at me funny and you'd say, wait, what do you mean? Like, why should it be illegal, right? We don't start from a place where everything is illegal and then make things legal as we can only when we can provide especially strong arguments for making them legal. So I think that's just the you're putting the cart before the horse, so to speak, there. And also, I think I have presented semi-compelling arguments that there is an injustice being perpetuated, which is to say that we're causing people suffering by throwing them in prison. We're violating people's autonomy. We're violating the principle that we should generally consider consent to be a necessary and sufficient condition for a sexual encounter being legal, which I think is generally a plausible principle. I've given utilitarian arguments. And you said you wanted me to clarify that on the autonomy part. And I guess I can do that. I would just say, like, because you wanted to know how I get from autonomy to we should legalize incest. And I mean, it's very straightforward. It's not that I think that autonomy, that violating autonomy is categorically bad. I just think that in general, the fact that an act violates someone's autonomy counts against doing that act, right? And clearly, legalizing or making incest illegal violates people's autonomy because we're saying we're legally not going to allow you to do what you want to do with your own body, right? And there could be strong overriding reason that overrides that and says, okay, well, there's sufficient harm by legalizing incestual relationships such that it justifies infringing on people's bodily autonomy. But I would just say I don't think I've heard an argument to that effect that would constitute like giving me an overriding reason. But I guess that's going to be our core disagreement because that's what we've been discussing.
I have yet to hear a moral or legal argument as to why child pornography. Okay.
Bunk.
Wash. Okay, had some good ideas. How much longer do we have left of this video? An hour and 12 minutes. God. Jeez, dude.
That's how long we have left.
Yeah, an hour and 12 minutes is how long we have left of the video. It's a little bit AIDS. All right.
State that last sentence for me one more time. I just want to make sure.
Or not. No, we're an hour and 12 minutes in. We have about like 30 minutes left. Oh, God.
Yeah, I would just need an argument that there is some harm associated with legalizing incest that overrides autonomy considerations plus all the other considerations that I've presented.
Okay.
And I haven't been convinced of that.
Gotcha. Yeah. So, and I think this is one of our core disagreements, kind of getting back to the burden of proof there. And so I want to start there and then work backwards on some of the points that you offered. And then after this, if you want to respond to me and then move into closing, I'd be happy to because I think we're a little bit over time. And I know there's so many arguments here that have or have not been addressed just for lack of time. And we could probably talk about this for like 4 hours. Yeah, so as far as the harm associated with incest as a basis of, criminalization of incest, right? I think this is where there's the largest disconnect between you and I in this debate of all of the things that we've discussed so far. So we can agree that there's going to be a complicated and nuanced utilitarian analysis that we may or may not want to engage in, particularly if we want to engage on this basis. I'm not personally utilitarian, but I'm playing ball for the sake of debate, right? And I'm happy to say, hey, look, yeah, we should understand and deliberate on the consequences anyway of our actions. Like that seems reasonable. Even to me here in Virtue Ethics Land, that seems like a reasonable thing to do. So let's look at them. But the problem here is that we're not discussing if we should criminalize incest. We're discussing if we should legalize it, right? Incest is already overwhelmingly criminalized. It's already illegal. So that's an issue. And I think that's a pretty big issue for the argument here, particularly for the burden of proof, because we're trying to motivate a new action of legalization, this next action, right? And so you and I can both agree on this aspect of critique, right? That, hey, our solutions, if we're going to be positing a solution, we do need to have certain things met, right? And so the spirit of that kind of critique, I think, is true of both of our arguments, where we want to make sure all of these concerns are met. I think the difference is, right, you're the one advocating for the change in the status quo, right? And that change, because it is a change, right, that's going to motivate kind of a need for the burden of proof to be addressed by you, bringing forth that proposition. So that might be the biggest issue here. But with that being said, as far as the harms associated with incest, right, and I think this is some of our disagreement. I don't want to totally rehash everything, but yeah, there's the risk with inbreeding, there's the propensity for like grooming, psychological abuse. There are these sociological harms. What happens to the family structure? What happens to other people when they do this? What happens when your neighbor that is so ooped out, or is maybe we might characterize them in the world of legalized incest, right, as the anti-incest bigot, right? What happens when they get wind of that, right? And now we have these people practicing incest that's allegedly consensual. And they come under the gun from that person. That's another type of harm that we need to consider and that we need to have strong plans for and dealing with, so that we're not seeing this massive public backlash from a taboo. Sometimes it's just not the right time. Now, as far as passing a law through Congress to this effect, I think you also run into a practical problem, which is the number of people, and you've talked about this, but the number of people inclined to agree with incestuous behavior, or not agree rather, but because we know that number is low as kind of the default with the taboo, but the people willing to participate in incestuous behavior, we do know that number is fairly low. You brought up the Westermark effect, and sure, maybe if some people are groomed, that does increase the probability of them having sex within the family, things like that, and it seems like we're generally of an agreement there. But on that note, right, you're going to be asking your congressperson to do something that is so taboo for you, right? And then to get all of the other congresspeople, all the other senators, right, or enough of them on board with this. And think about all of the other important things that you need them to be doing. We're talking about fixing welfare in this country so that people who need help are getting help. We're talking about fixing our economy so that there's jobs and things that people can do, making sure people have healthcare and quality education and all of these things that we've identified as goods because these are our community's values, because this is what we want, right? And when you go and tie this incest thing to them, right, now they have a massive obstacle in preventing those things, right? And so while this may be tangential to or further down the line on our utilitarian analysis of some maybe like tertiary effects down the line, let's not abandon that, right? We'd be telling our congresspeople to actually adopt some pretty I think what America would largely consider cringy positions that may cost them future elections and lose them to parties that would do terrible things in the United States. And we should absolutely be wary of that. Now, as far as do people agree that incest is permissible upon reflection? Maybe upon reflection of like the extended kind of thoughts from liberal values, and maybe people do share a lot of those liberal values. But I think people also put some reasonable stopping places there, right? So I think one of those stopping places we could demonstrate an example with perhaps like the Second Amendment. I think most people are for background checks of some form, and we could look at the text of the Second Amendment and say, hey, it says the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, right? And if limiting a criminal from getting a firearm is an infringement, which we want to go to like Webster's dictionary of the 1800s and go discuss that, and we go, hey, you know what, that does look like an infringement according to that, right? But they'll say, yeah, you know what, maybe some of these liberal values aren't everything they're cracked up to be. I have a little bit more common sense than that. We can see from the empirical data that we are preventing criminals from getting firearms by having these background checks, and that's doing good for society, right? Sometimes the reflection on liberal values, frankly, isn't enough, right? And further, we're not too concerned with the proposition incest is permissible. We're concerned with incest should be legalized, and the simple fact of the matter is that the people disagree, right? And so when we get into the shared values of the community and ensuring those are represented in the democracy, we don't have a constitutional issue here. We do have the people voting their will into power. If the people wanted to vote in politicians to change this incest thing, they could have already done it, right? And so like when I put all that together, it just seems like it's not really the time to be talking about legalizing incest.
Okay, so I would just say, firstly, with respect,
he's made some good points. The problem with this guy, I find, is I feel he made some good rebuttals, but I feel he's not good at tying it back at the end. He's not good at the conclusion point of like when you have your starting argument, you got the middle part of the starting point of your argument, then you have the middle point of your argument, then you have the ending point of your argument to really tie in what you're saying, and it feels like that's where he was weak. And I think he doesn't need to be weak there. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, a lot of the arguments he's making could be like used to justify any kind of like thing being illegal. Like if we're in a highly transphobic society and people just don't want like, I would say like, yeah, we should probably like universally agree that like being trans should be an okay thing to do, right? And somebody would have come in and be like, well, a lot of people don't think that, so you think it should be legal still? Well, yeah, that's not really the thing that we're disagreeing on. That's the problem. The problem is we're disagreeing on the idea that like, we're disagreeing on the idea that like, should we all believe this, right?
I agree with that, but I also think the problem that he has also is that I think the middle bit about like everybody when like Mouthy decided to go with like a liberal arguments for incest. It is true that most people, probably including you, like have some reasonable limits that you have on like liberal values. You know what I mean? Like unless we're going to be libertarians and argue how everyone should be able to do whatever they want, we all have some limits there. But I feel like if he attacked the liberal position strongly, I think he would have came up with a win. But it doesn't seem he's just spent all his time attacking the liberal argument that Mouthy made. As one of the arguments Mouthy made for incest was the liberal argument, and I think if he spent all his time in that thing, attacking the liberal argument, he would have had some kind of win in that, because Mouthy would have had to concede some of those points.
Sure.
That people do have some acceptance of like constraints on like behaviors and actions and that
Yeah, sure.
within the law. But yeah.
But I think the arguments are always like the idea that we're going to be maximizing liberty by limiting it to some extent, right? That's what we're going to. But I don't know. It seems like a really, really weird position that he's taking, and like as you said, he's very bad at wrapping things up, like to conclude things. He's really, really bad at that. So we got like a bunch of different points we're jumping around on. Yeah.
Back to the question of the burden of proof. You said that the burden of proof is on me because we currently have laws against incest. But I don't think I accept that characterization of the burden of proof when we're talking about should we make something legal, should we make something illegal, right? Because I don't think that it makes sense to say that the normative legitimacy of a law is in some respect relative to the laws that currently exist in a given society, right? So imagine we had like this dystopian society where almost every activity is illegal, right? Like sex is illegal, going on a jog is illegal, like literally almost everything a person can do is illegal. And then imagine like I come into that society and I'm like, hey, I think that like as a moral matter, these things should not be illegal. Would you say like, okay, well, given that every single thing is outlawed in this society, the burden of proof is on you to provide some strong reason to legalize every single thing that you want to be legal. Well, in all likelihood, I wouldn't be able to do that. So that's just basically amounting to say, yeah, it should be the case that in this hypothetical society, everything should stay illegal. Because if everything's already illegal, not very likely that I'm going to be able to provide like some clear-cut argument for legalizing every single thing that's already illegal. And so I think that what reflecting on sort of hypotheticals like that shows is that no, regardless of what the current laws are, the normative burden of proof is still on the person who wants to outlaw something to show why that thing should be outlawed. Because any other principle just sort of seems to lead to unacceptable results. You also talked about, well, what happens when bigots get wind of incest? That could cause some harm to the people who are engaging in incest. But I don't think that, I think that is going to apply to, I think that position is going to have some like really harsh reductios, right? So should we make, like in a racist society, should we make interracial marriage illegal because we're afraid of what will happen to people who do it if bigots catch wind of it? Obviously not, right? Should we make homosexuality illegal because we're afraid of what's going to happen to homosexuals if bigots find out? Obviously not, right? And just, I think that's obvious enough, but if you want additional reasons for why that would be the case, the first reason would be that, look, the stigma exists and it's going to cause people harm, but the fact that the stigma is causing people harm, right, and the fact that there are bigots out there is a bad thing, and we should be working to alleviate that stigma, and that stigma is going to only be alleviated when we start taking steps such as legalizing these activities that are stigmatized, right? And the second reason is just, it's going to be less like utilitarian and more just like, look, if two free adults have decided, look, I know this activity is stigmatized, but this is how I want to express myself, and I'm willing to bear the burden of that stigma because I just want to be who I am and engage in this activity regardless. I mean, who are you to say, no, I need to protect you from the stigma, so I'm not going to allow you to express yourself? I mean, that just seems absurd. And in addition to that, you talked about like political capital, like if we have our politicians vote for incest, that might harm them. And that might be true, but I would just say that what we're doing when you say something like that is I think you're just conflating pragmatism with morality, right? Which is to say that, so for another example, right, I think that the most moral way to structure our healthcare provision in the United States would be through a sort of a single payer like healthcare system. But I also think that given who's in Congress, it's very unlikely that we'd ever be able to achieve that. And so I think we should, in the meantime, push for something more politically feasible, like a public option or some sort of a multi-payer system. But I can hold those positions simultaneously. I can say this law would be most moral to have, like this would be the most moral law, while at the same time saying, and furthermore, I could say that this is the most moral law, and we should have this law. We should have single payer, while at the same time saying that, like, based on current political circumstances, it's maybe not wise to put all of our political capital into fighting for that thing at the current moment, right? And then, in addition, you brought up the issue of stopping points, and you brought up this analogy to gun rights. Like, sure, some people think that we should be very liberal on gun rights, but they're still going to admit, like, okay, well, maybe these liberal considerations aren't all they're cracked up to be all the time. There could be overriding reason in this particular case to accept something like background checks. Even though I generally support gun rights, I just think there should be the stopping point. But I would just say that these two things are disanalogous. The case that you presented, the reason we would put that stopping point is because even though we generally take like the liberal position on people should just be able to own guns because of autonomy to be a consideration, in some cases, like in the cases of background checks, there are alternative, overriding, normatively legitimate considerations that make it such that we should just override the liberal considerations. And so I'm just going to say that these things are disanalogous because I don't believe that there is a normatively legitimate overriding reason to set the stopping point at incest, right? And I guess that's sort of what we've been arguing. And And finally, I will just say that with respect to the idea that like people disagree that incest should be legalized, I mean, I just don't think that we would ever accept this as like a normative legitimating factor, that we shouldn't have this law because people disagree with the law, right? Surely if we lived in a society where slavery was legal and 90% of people were white slave owners who were in favor of slavery being legal, that wouldn't mean that it's morally legitimate to continue having that law, or that it wouldn't be morally preferable to overturn that law. So yeah, I guess that's all I really had to say.
Yeah, and then I guess I'll respond, and then if you want to respond to me, and then move into your closing, and then if you're good with that.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, so I just wanted to talk about a few of those points because I know some of them have been, I just like when we go in circles and there's some obvious disagreements on facts between us, where we would just be kind of going in a circle back and forth for a long time here. But I wanted to first talk about this world of everything illegal and demonstrating and meeting the burden of proof to demonstrate that there's an issue with that. And this is kind of like a bit of an outlandish kind of like silly world, right? But like it's a quality intuition pump, I think. And we could look at that world and say, well, of course not everything can be illegal, right? It would be illegal to enforce the law. So that the system defeats itself, it's a non-starter. It's very easy for me to demonstrate that burden of proof. But maybe in this world, right, we're not talking about everything literally being illegal, but we're saying, hey, walking down the street at any point during the day is illegal. And it's like, well, then if you continue with that law, we have good empirical reason to think that the masses will starve. They're going to get very pissed off. And then you're going to lose that government that's supposed to kind of maintain order. So it doesn't seem like this is a suitable way of maintaining any kind of order, right? So it's very easy to meet that burden in many matters. And some matters are much more difficult, and I think incest is one of them. But we have even like matters of things like speech or firearms rights or Fourth Amendment or Fifth Amendment violations in the U.S. where it's still difficult to meet those burdens sometimes. But my point here on the after effects, like what to do with the bigots and everything, is not just about the harms to the bigots or something like that. It's not just about the harms to those individuals. It's what is the plan here, right? What's the next move? So like, is someone going to come out with an incestuous relationship and we're going to go, like the Civil Rights Act type of stuff, where we're going to then militarize and deploy the National Guard there to defend their homes? Like what is the plan to avoid the public fallout? Like what do we know or what do we anticipate that the public fallout would be from the violation
the incest
of this taboo?
military.
So that's
the incest military is going to be very big. The incest military. Oh dear.
Incest patrol. Let's go.
God. Oh man, we're going. This is quite the. This is quite the thing. Yeah. Holy shit.
But what is his argument? Saying that we're gonna have to reinforce like fucking what? I wasn't paying too attention. Did he say something about militia or no?
It's an understatement, wrong. That's always been an understatement.
Of course, Wrong isn't paying attention. Of course he isn't.
Fuck you.
Wrong. At school, do you pay attention or do you like to
Fuck
like
no, my
go?
ADHD is so bad. It's like
Haha, retard.
yeah, I'm a spur.
I'm a spur. I don't think you know what that word means, Wrong. I don't know who you think
Yeah,
you know what that's
I don't think he knows what they word mean.
All right, Wrong. What is the word spurg? Who's it a slur against?
Autistic. No, autism kids. Whatever.
Autism kids. Whatever. Do you have autism or do you have ADHD?
Practically the same.
No. Oh my god. Now we're just okay.
It's like practically the same. Like what? Okay, a lot of people who have autism like think that sometimes they might be diagnosed as ADHD and shit. I mean, the symptoms of or
They're basically the same thing. Wrong.
Yeah.
2022.
I mean, it fucks up. We're all brain dead, right? So it's like
Yes.
it's practically the same. It's just like, oh well, some things affect your cognitive like functions. Like I don't know. I know.
Wrong. You
people are
okay?
like,
Is your
"You
brain
just-"
hurting or something?
Yeah, my brain is hurting. You know.
Oh dear. Oh dear.
Average viewer. I mean,
That's another thing. So that's a really important consideration for our plans when we change the status quo, because if we're not accounting for where things will go from there, we can run into all kinds of perils and issues, right? So another issue is that legalization is not the only way to remove or to stigmatization or to destigmatize the issue. So there are other things that we can do. There are things like information campaigns that we've done on different issues in the past, and those can be really effective, right? And so we can have certain information campaigns put out over time where we do see a benefit to letting people know, hey, look, if you're a victim of this type of thing, or if you're involved in this type of thing, you can have these these negative effects on your life, and we want to get you the help that you need to get out of that. We're not interested in making you feel bad, right? We want to actually demonstrate that you have some power and control in your life, and that you're able to form the relationships you want to form and such, right? And generally just making mental health more accessible. There's tons of things that we can do to destigmatize that do not involve legalization of a particular behavior that does have some stigma around it. And then finally, I wanted to discuss why I think that example is analogous, because sometimes this happens, I think, where an analogy is taken from the listener, maybe in a different way than the person speaking it is. So I just wanted to offer a little bit more clarity. The only extent that I want that question to be analogous is to say, sure, there are times where we override our liberal values because of other values, and there are times in the law where we do that as well, and where we find that fitting under the law. And it does seem like you and I agree on that point more broadly, and I just wanted to clarify that as well. But with that being said, I'll give you the last word to respond, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, so I would just say, with respect to the intuition pump that I gave, I said that, so sure, like, of course I didn't mean like everything would be illegal in a sense that like even enforcing the law is illegal. That'd be self-defeating. I more so just meant like almost every activity that's legal now that's just like completely nonchalant, like walking down the street, or playing in the snow, or having sex, or forming friendships with other people. All of these things are legal in the society. And it seemed like you said like, okay, well, even if we're imagining this form of society, we could give good reasons for all of these things being legal. But the only way in which I could see that being the case is if the argument just applies to something like autonomy. Like if we're going to say the reason we have good reason to make all of these things legal is because making them illegal violates something like autonomy, and all else equal, we shouldn't violate people's autonomy. And it seems like in these cases, we have no overriding reason to violate people's autonomy by preventing them from doing these things. And so therefore, we shouldn't do it. And so that's the only way in which I can see you holding the position that we could make a good argument for legalizing every single thing that's illegal. But if that's the argument you're going to accept, then I think that just is tantamount to conceding my point that the burden of proof actually is on you. Because if you think it's acceptable to just say, all else equal, it's wrong to violate people's autonomy, having a law against something violates people's autonomy, and therefore, unless we have an overriding reason, we shouldn't do it, then that's just you acknowledging, okay, yeah, if I want incest to be illegal, I should have to provide the overriding reason for it being illegal, in which case the burden of proof really is on you. And I do start out with the advantage, as I said in my opening. You also made the point that you said, like, what's the plan here? How do we avoid the public fallout? How do we avoid people being attacked for engaging in incest? And I mean, look, worst case scenario, there is none. But that worst case scenario, right? I mean, like that was already the case when we legalized things like gay marriage, right? We just said, hey, there's the stigmatized activity, and now you're allowed to engage in it. And you might be attacked for that. Homophobic people might attack you, and we're not going to send in the National Guard or something to protect married gay couples' homes. And so you're just going to have to take that risk. And so I would just say, like, and that was like a perfectly acceptable thing to do in that case. So I would say, like, even in the worst case scenario where we have no plan, the fact that there is no plan still doesn't provide good reason for criminalizing this thing just because it's stigmatized and just because there will be fallout. And I think I gave additional reasons why that's the case. Like, it's ultimately up to the person if they think it's fit for them to risk that stigma because they want to express themselves. Who are we to tell them that they're not allowed to do that? And also, the harm you're appealing to is harm caused by stigma, and legalization is a step towards reducing that stigma, and therefore reducing that genre of harm that we both agree is a harm that counts in favor of us avoiding situations which would cause that harm. And now, you also said that we can destigmatize things without criminalization, but I guess I don't know why we would ever do that, right, with respect to incest. Like, if we acknowledge that incest is not something that warrants people being stigmatized over it, I don't know why we would think that it does warrant people being thrown in cages over it. That just seems sort of bizarre. And then finally, like with respect to the gun example, I guess I'm just sort of still unclear on what the point of that was, because it seems like we both agree that in the case of guns, liberal considerations might to some degree count in favor of us legalizing people owning as many guns as they want. But then we should also have some laws that restrict that because there are overriding considerations, like considerations related to preventing shootings and things like that, and preventing gun-related deaths and suicides and so on. And so if that's the case, that the reason, because you gave that as an example of, look, sometimes we allow stopping points on certain principles that we generally think count in favor of certain actions. And if that's the point, right, then all I'm saying is, like, sure, but then in order for the gun example to be analogous to the incest example, you would actually have to provide an overriding reason that justifies putting the stopping condition on incest. You'd have to appeal to some sort of harm that legalizing incest would cause that counts as that sort of overriding consideration. And I guess, as I've argued throughout this debate, I think the reasons that have been presented for that, to play that role, so things like genetic concerns related to inbreeding and concerns relating to abuse and grooming, I don't think these things really hold up to, I don't think these concerns hold up to scrutiny.
All right. Yeah, did you want to move into a closing statement?
Sure. I guess I don't have like much of a closing statement. I would just reiterate, like, look, all else equal, we should avoid making things illegal. Putting people in prison causes harm. We shouldn't violate people's bodily autonomy. We shouldn't violate people's right to do what they want to do with their own body, with other consenting adults. We should allow people to engage in activities that they consent to, because generally speaking, they know better than you do whether or not they're going to benefit from a certain activity. And we generally value privacy. We don't want the government snooping around in our private lives if we can avoid it. And we should respect people's choices. We all have some deviant preferences, some deviant tastes, according to one group or another. So we should just try to be more accepting, respect people's unique and sometimes disturbing to us preferences, and not demonize or lock them up for it. And yeah, so I guess I just think, like, in order for me to be okay with criminalizing incest, putting consenting adults in jail for what they do with their own bodies, I would need like very strong reason to think that there's some overriding reason to do that. But I don't know. I haven't been persuaded of that. I think that if anything, incest harms our ability to deal with incestuous abuse. Or at worst, that's the case, and at best, laws against incest are just redundant because we already have laws covering things like abuse and grooming. I think with respect to genetic disorders, this isn't really going to be a problem that harms society to any substantial degree, just because even if we legalize incest, that doesn't mean we have to legalize inbreeding and legalizing and it's just unlikely that enough people would ever engage in incest just because we have a biological aversion to it for this to constitute a substantial problem. With respect to family arguments, again, it just seems like preserving certain family roles or family relationships and making sure that families don't break up is just not a matter that concerns the state. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess I haven't, I don't think the burden of proof has been met that would justify making incest illegal. So yeah, I guess that's my closing statement.
All right, and I'll try to keep mine brief here. So there's a few things going on, and I do want to thank Mouthy Infidel for taking this up. Like I said in the beginning, I think of it as kind of an uphill battle. I know he disagrees regarding that burden of proof, but we want to discuss that just further, right? When we are entering a debate and we are arguing in the affirmative for propositions, we do need to meet that burden of proof, and we do take on that burden of proof by arguing in the affirmative. So with that said, part of dealing with that is making sure that we address the core arguments of each other's positions in this debate, but also that we make sure that we address when we bring changes in law or when we recommend changes in law, that we can properly motivate those changes. And I don't think that was necessarily demonstrated today. In fact, I don't think it was demonstrated. But the most important counterpoint from my argument, I believe, was missed, right? And perhaps due to lack of time, but we need to have that discussion as to why the values of the people should not be reflected in government. Mouthy's response, it seems, is, well, change your values, right? Make it so that incest doesn't disgust you. Make it so that incest is acceptable to you. Will you? Can you? Some of these things just speak to your core, and even if you could, would it reflect the values of other Americans, right? If you had to legalize it right now, would it make sense? Would it make Americans happy, right? Now, I wanted to turn to think back on some of those experts we discussed, or I discussed earlier. So I wanted to talk about Dr. Samantha Allen, who holds a PhD in women's studies and specializes in sexuality, that there's no such thing as consensual incest. Joanne Zucchetto, a psychotherapist specializing in incest recovery, there's no such thing as consensual incest. Michael Salomon, psychologist, part of the therapy for incest victims is to stop victimization by changing their perspective of being somebody who is okay to be the slave of somebody else, quote unquote, right? And even the psychology professor, Timothy
Please stop
Hartshorn,
watching this.
PhD,
Screw
wrote,
you, creeper.
with incest, everybody loses, right? Incest isn't good. Our experts are telling us it's not good. We've seen some reasons for that today. We talked about some of the genetic disorders. We talked about the psychological abuse. We talked about the grooming and emotional incest that many children undergo. And those
All right, yeah, that's enough of his closing statement. That was quite the video.
Fuck Bunk. Tired of that dumbass loser. Crying in his bedroom while I'm cruising in my cruiser. This dumbass bitch, thinking that he's cool while streaming on Twitch. Call this Vietnam, we're gonna get you on a weight loss program. Everyone knows, you will never be a pro. Well, I'm putting my rap game, always tripping out, never no problems with burnout. The vids keep coming, so does the drama, clearing your notepad, your tweets aging with a granddad. Capital of chat, doing flips, everyone in the chat, Bunk is a bitch, yeah.